Chapter 1082. On Zhuo Jingxi's side, she thought that since she could not achieve her goal in school, continuing to stay in the laboratory would only bring trouble to Professor Xu. She simply left the school for the time being and ran to her rented house outside the school in a daze. Hua Ling and Zhong Yu also did not want to go to other people's experimental groups. With Professor Xu's tacit approval, they temporarily put aside their work in the school's laboratory and remained as nominal graduate students. The matter of converting the 5 God-tier formulas from formulas into finished products had to be completely put on hold because of this. However, wanting her to return to the United States to plead guilty and compensate was also a pipe dream. Prince was also well aware of this. America did not have the ability to extradite such high-level talents from China. The fundamental purpose of Prince's lawsuit was nothing more than a show of force to prevent Zhuo Jingxi from completing the transformation of the results in China and turning Prince's patent into something that belonged to China. Let's not talk about international relations, but the concept of intellectual property protection must be respected. Prince's original purpose was only to force Zhuo Jingxi out of China's domestic scientific research institutions. That was all. Of course, no matter what the final result was, whether it was left unsettled or Zhuo Jingxi compensated for the losses, Zhuo Jingxi's global academic career should basically come to an end. From now on, unless China's domestic scientific research institutions quietly accepted her, she would no longer have any place in the world, especially in the field of photocatalysis. In addition, even if she could produce second-class scientific research results in China's domestic scientific research institutions, she would not have any qualifications to sign her name, let alone obtain fame and fortune. Otherwise, once the results with her name were taken to the world, it would be impossible to obtain any recognition and support. When she chose to leave the United States with Prince's samples, this outcome was destined. Originally, Prince had thought that this would be a long and drawn-out battle. He did not expect that he would be able to get the help of a major corporation in Wuxia. Zhuo Jingxi herself seemed to be exceptionally decisive. When she saw that the situation was not good, she immediately withdrew. Prince's goal was basically achieved, and Tiansong Water was even more satisfied. Song Ningyuan felt that he had completely cut off Chen Guang's escape route. No matter what he did now, after 4 months, if he could not get the support of the new photocatalyst technology, Chen Guang would know that he had no choice but to accept Song Ningyuan's offer. Letting go was the only way out. Chen Guang couldn't come up with any good ideas for the situation in the country. He sighed. Forget it. If it's too late, then so be it. Teacher Zhuo, you don't have to blame yourself. Women finally made a comeback in the morning. If the domestic conditions can't be amended, we don't have to. At the same time, the box office was a terrifying number that could describe this. She felt that she had failed to live up to Chen Guang's expectation. He had underestimated the explosive power of the occupancy rate was still as high as he had only estimated the situation of women based on the box office statistics of other volumes and the second volume of Very Own Lab from nearly 100 parts printing. Although the box office spent money, they also sent a countless rate of over. From now on, we can start the attendance rate usually did. Originally, this was wanted to provide however intellectual property rights, but he was stopped by laboratory to produce results. At that time, Zhuo Jingxi still had an attendance rate of over 90%. There still would cost a lot of money screenings at night. Besides, women had definitely didn't want to return around successfully achieved a. You don't have to shoot yourself in the second day of release. You can't go reaching the top in one fell. You haven't seen the recent news. Now that the box office had turned tide and there were still the box office to build up the reputation. Let's not talk about really volume 200 million West society officially. How many copies did you print? It would officially be the 500,000 major formula. Okay, that's ever since he came to Los Angeles, the old man had more copies. As long as we can produce results, it was said that any sales in North America can reach 5 the Tongshan factory if it's old man was a foreign country. It's less than 1,000 copies. Being kind to others, you know that piracy in China. Chen Guang probably calculated you think that he was easy to bully. Chen Guang weighed what I was thinking, so you started too much on the situation. He was really my actions were seen by in the simple way, he would be able to say it out loud. It's a reference book that everyone can read. With acting skills are not only useful for acting, you would be letting down also useful in real life. Even called on your friends and audience to consider my popularity. Did you really think that I was afraid my fans will buy more million copies? The initial 40 million show my considering advertising by still small recovered in 5 days. Tomorrow I will openly tell all of you that I was wrong. What others read on North American producers are the kind of I'm going to read novels that I read. Women had a chance of hitting a famous book like World School needs to be continued to boycott carefully. His Qinhuang boycott have to take more than $300 million US dollars. If you don't buy a paper It was just enough to cover the cost of building a ways-level laboratory that when Qin had previously estimated. He exuded this was not even considering the domestic box office profit that he was aiming. This meant that he didn't need to look for financing at all. He could easily build a laboratory that belonged to him on the third day of the screening. Qin shared out a distribution company that 10 copies were the first print. After 48 hours, sometimes I'm a miser arrogant. He finally finished the second volume. I won't say anything else. He waved his hand and called to still a little unwilling. You go ahead and insist on it. He threw the US chatted flash drive. There's nothing for me to do for now. Qin tell you 10 million copies at 1 p.m. to the box office of the second day of screening in China. It's too arrogant to call the first print of 10 million copies a small target. Let's call it a medium target. Let's go. After saying that, he turned around and left the temporary office of the Qinguang Group with his head held high. Now he felt very secure and couldn't find any reason to fail. A few minutes after Qinguang left, Lu Xiaoyang came in from outside. Fang Qianyu pulled him over. Lu Xiaoyang, boss just said that we need to print 10 million copies in China? I feel like it's a failure. Lu Xiaoyang rolled his eyes at him. Think about your past. Think about our past. Did the boss make any mistakes in his decisions? Why is your Fang Qianyu still unwilling to be enlightened? Poor Fang Qianyu was laughed at by Lu Xiaoyang again. He muttered to himself as he went back to his office and made a call to China. After hanging up, he looked at the electronic version of Qinguang's manuscript in front of him and murmured to himself, "Can we really sell 10 million copies of the English version in China? We deserve it." Chapter 1083. That night, as the global box office of Women started to heat up, Qinguang's blockbuster monograph, World School of Performing Arts, shocking, 7 billion, was finally released into 2 volumes. Actually, many people had always thought that Qinguang was bragging when he said he wanted to write a book. A person who had his first electrocution said he wanted to write a monograph on performing arts and teach others how to act? This was even more ridiculous than him wanting to win an Oscar. However, it had been 2 days since the movie was released. Although most people in the film industry still refused to enter the cinema, there was no doubt that even a blind person could not ignore the phenomenal reputation of Women. Even so, many people still thought that Qinguang was joking when he said he wanted to write a book. Even though there were rumors that he had given away 150 copies of the so-called first volume on the day of the premiere, and that the cover of the first volume had been shown many times on major media and television, many people still chose to ignore it. Not many people thought about digging deeper into the true meaning of the 150 copies that he had given away. They had no choice but to ignore it. This guy's cover was too glaring, and they were afraid that they would be blinded. However, there were a few local reporters and media people in Los Angeles who got their hands on the first volume and were ready to write something about it. However, until today they still did not do anything, and it was puzzling. Among these people was Donald Joshtan, the most staunch and earliest anti-Qinguang activist, and the first veteran filmmaker to publicly call for a boycott of Qinguang in the United States. At that time, many people heard Madame Joshtan's statement and expressed their deepest sympathy for Donald's experience. It had been 2 days since the incident, and Donald, who usually appeared at the Wuxia theater every day, had unexpectedly disappeared. His friends in the industry called him to see if he had been subjected to Madame Joshtan's domestic violence. He appeared to be in a good state of mind over the phone, and he was very excited. However, he was unwilling to tell others what he was doing. Only then did the people in the film industry feel relieved. Otherwise, they would really be worried that Madame Joshtan had been bewitched by the Easterners and would harm Donald when she returned. Old Donald had already met with misfortune. Due to various reasons, the volume that Qinguang sent out in advance did not cause too much of a stir. In a sense, it had something to do with the huge face on the cover of the volume. But now, the first and second volumes of his book had finally appeared in front of everyone as an official publication. The filmmaker could not help but feel very conflicted. To buy or not to buy, that was the question. If he bought it, although the price was not expensive, it would still mean that he had submitted to Qinguang and he would lose face. In addition, although it would not increase the box office of his movie or the sales of his so-called monograph, it would also be a betrayal of his integrity as a filmmaker. He didn't want to buy it, but he was curious about what kind of book it was. If he didn't take a look first, he wouldn't be able to find fault with him, and he wouldn't be able to refute and ridicule him with reason. These people in the European and American film circles hesitated again and again. Most of them finally decided to continue to wait and see. No matter what, they would scold him first. This was Los Angeles. This was the commanding heights of modern industry, Hollywood. They could not allow a Chinese person to behave atrociously here. Even if your movie was really as good as it was boasted to be on the internet, you would not be recognized by the mainstream. Didn't you want an Oscar? Didn't you want fame and fortune? Dream on. Even if those stupid fighting fanatics really brought you crazy box office, you would not be able to get real fame. Without mainstream recognition, you would not be able to get an Oscar. We are the ones who vote, not those ordinary audiences who don't know anything. With these thoughts in mind, the target of the boycott in the European and American film circles was further expanded, extending from Qin Guang's movie to his book. Unfortunately, it was of no use. Thanks to the good reputation of women, the sales of World's Faction were doing well. That night, in major first-tier cities, especially in bookstores and newsstands near the city cinemas, when the posters of the new book had just been put up and the goods had just been distributed, consumers flocked to buy it. In addition, the big gift package that was tied to the movie ticket together with the ticket and the book was only $29.9, which was 25% cheaper than buying the book alone. It caused a frenzy of buying. Basically, the number of tickets sold in major cinemas was the same. The first batch of 200,000 copies was sold out that very night. Additional orders for the movie version flew to Tang Xiaokai's publishing and distribution company. This scene was like a new volume of Harry Potter on the shelves. At 1 o'clock in the morning, the North American box office on the third day of release was released. It was a jaw-dropping $40 million. Not only did it reach the top, but it also set a new record for a single day's box office in recent years. In fact, as early as the second day, the box office brought by the fan effect caused by the premiere guests had basically been exhausted. There was only one fundamental reason why the movie could still perform so well on the third day: the quality of the movie itself. Just as Qin Guang said to others in the beginning, when the standard of the movie was strong enough to crush all negative comments and boycotts, to surpass the barriers of subtitles and skin color, and to crush the cultural barriers between Wuxia and Europe and America, all the stumbling blocks in front of the movie would be useless and nothing to fear. What's more, the positive publicity that Tianguang Group put out to the public had never stopped. Whether you believe it or not, I first boasted until I believed it myself. It could be roughly calculated that 2 days before the movie was released, the positive publicity that Tianguang Group spread on the internet at their own expense accounted for less than 5%. The rest were all kinds of negative information and boycotts. After the explosive premiere, with the help of the many big-name guests, the positive publicity rose to 10% before the premiere ended. After the premiere, during the broadcast time of the first public screening, due to the live interviews that took place at the Huaxia Theater at the end of the premiere, as well as the influence of the impressions written by these big-name guests on their respective social media, the proportion of positive publicity further increased, reaching 15%. Later, as more and more people walked out of the cinema on the second day, almost all of them praised the movie. There were even more good reviews on IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes. One after another, pertinent reviews from ordinary audiences spread. Now, the positive publicity about women on the internet had almost reached more than 40%, and it was still expanding at a faster and faster pace. In just 3 days, Qin Guang even became a celebrity in the United States. Because of the cultural differences between Europe and America and Huaxia, his appearance was even more widely spread here. He was recognized from time to time when he walked on the street. Maybe it was a warm greeting or maybe it was a disdainful look, and they would spit at something next to them. But there were also disadvantages to this. He had finally stolen half a day of leisure and wanted to talk about life with a German girl, but he had no choice but to retreat. Damn it, I'm so angry, but I can't do anything bad. What made him even angrier was that Tang Ying, who was in charge of everything, actually flew back to China on the day of the premiere. Where's the jean collection? I've already taken off my pants, but you ran away first? I've only been busy for 2 days. Can't you wait for me for a while? Qin Guang felt so suffocated that he couldn't breathe. The next morning, Qin Guang went out with his head held high after a good night's sleep. He didn't need to care about the box office anymore. He raised his hand and looked at the time. It was December 28th. It was time to officially announce his plan for the Olympic Games. It's not popular to hide things like in China when doing things in Europe and America. I want to win an Oscar, so I have to be honest with them. I want the audience, the filmmakers, and the film critics to have a good first impression of the film. I want them to treat Women as a film aimed at the Olympic Games from the very beginning, so that when they watch the movie, they can evaluate what Women is relying on and how likely it is. The more the audience thinks about it, the easier it is for them to see it clearly, and the easier it is for them to fall into their own trap. It doesn't matter whether their motives are nitpicking or flattering. Whether it has the potential for the Olympic Games or not, the first impression is very important. If you pretend to hide it first and then suddenly tell others when it's time to be nominated, others will think that you're joking. At that time, the Oscar judges will already have a fixed list of nominees, and you won't even be on it. What do you expect others to do? Change their minds at the last minute? Besides, if you say it now, it'll be easier for Qin Guang to do more detailed public relations. Women was officially held at the Wuxia Theater in Hollywood at 10 o'clock in the morning. If it was a movie in the past, the press conference would have been held a week or two earlier. However, Women being screened in North America was Qin Guang's idea to begin with, and there were all sorts of things that happened, so the order was reversed. Also, when many media reporters received the invitation yesterday, their first reaction was that they thought they had seen it wrong. The press conference is actually held at the Wuxia Theater? It doesn't make sense. Donald Joshtan is the #1 hater of women in North America. I heard that he regretted agreeing to hold the premiere of Women at the Wuxia Theater. There's no reason for him to agree to hold the press conference at the Wuxia Theater, right? Did Mrs. Joshtan's domestic violence escalate? Poor Donald. Otherwise, let's not care about women anymore. There are too many people trying to take advantage of this hot topic. Let's focus on another hot topic. For example, North American movie celebrity Joshtan family's tragedy. Shocking. Celebrities can also be subjected to domestic violence. Is that so? In fact, even Qin Guang was puzzled about this. He asked Lu Xiaoyang backstage, "Buttface, how did you do it?" What did Donald say? Qin Guang had a deep impression of that stubborn old man. Lu Xiaoyang had a blank look on his face. I don't know either. Yesterday, our first choice wasn't the Wuxia Theater but the Flemington Hotel. However, it was obvious that the Wuxia Theater was more suitable. I just wanted to give it a try and asked Mr. Tang for Donald's number. In the end, when I made the request, he agreed immediately and even gave us the largest conference hall. Boss, look, it's this Hugo Hall. Qin Guang was puzzled. How henpecked is Donald? Do foreigners also have bronchitis? What about the fee? Qin Guang asked. Lu Xiaoyang was even more confused. Free. Alas, Donald is so pitiful. Qin Guang let out a long sigh. He suddenly felt that this old guy was not so annoying. He was also a man with a story. Why don't we hire a psychiatrist for him? I think it would be better if you talked to Mrs. Joshtan personally. Let Mrs. Joshtan change Donald's outlook on life in a more comprehensive way. Buttface suggested maliciously. He thought that Qin Guang was going to hit him when he was down. Qin Guang nodded. That's fine. Help me find out where the community service station that Mrs. Joshtan frequents is. I'll go there after the press conference. Lu Xiaoyang took a deep breath and mourned for Donald for 3 seconds. His execution was just right and he was able to do it right away. The boss is really cruel. He is worse than a beast. I can't afford to offend him. Buttface, why are you looking at me like that? Boss, I think you have become more handsome after your hair grew back. I'm almost fascinated by you. Get lost. Boss, it's time for you to go on stage. Chapter 1084. As Qin Guang walked from the backstage of Hugo Hall to the front of the stage, the camera flashes went off non-stop. Beams of light shone directly into Qin Guang's eyes. Old Master Guang used his internal energy to protect his eyes. As he walked, he only smiled and opened his eyes, looking especially elegant. He had to make sure that every photo taken of him was a handsome man with no blind spots. He didn't want to be photographed flirting and be ridiculed online. After the reporters were done taking photos, Qin Guang pressed his hands together and gestured to the huge pile of microphones in front of him, asking everyone to be quiet. There were some familiar faces that Qin Guang had seen at the premiere or in the aisle of the Wuxia Theater after the premiere. However, Qin Guang wasn't in the mood to be interviewed by these people back then because he knew that nothing good would come out of their mouths. Everyone, let's skip the pleasantries. We'll start asking questions from the first person in the first row from the left. You can ask me all your questions about women, including why I decided to release it in the US and the guests at the premiere. I will answer all your questions except for my personal life. As soon as Qin Guang finished speaking, the guy in the first row from the left stood up. Hello, Mr. Qin. I'm Damon from the Washington Post. There have always been rumors that you're here for the Oscar. May I ask if that's true? We would like to hear a more specific answer from you. Qin Guang grinned. Good question. Thank you, Mr. Damon, for asking this question. That's right, I'll answer everyone clearly now. I, Qin Guang, am indeed here for the Oscar for Best Actor. There was a brief uproar among the reporters. Everyone had different expressions on their faces. Some thought it was natural while others were in disbelief. Immediately the second person asked, "Mr. Chin, I'm Talent from the New York Times. May I ask, Mr. Chin, what do you think makes you worthy of the Oscar for Best Actor?" This was obviously a nitpicky guy. Chin Guang's expression didn't change. "You must be like the reporters I've met before. You've never been to a movie theater, so you don't know what I'm talking about. So how do you want me to answer you now?" Next. This pitiful reporter from the New York Times initially thought that he would be respected since he's from a reputable media company, so his words were a little arrogant. However, he never expected that Chin Guang would be even more arrogant, putting him on the spot. The third reporter stood up. "Mr. Chin, I'm Merlin from the Manhattan Weekly. I watched Women in the movie theater last night. I think that your acting skills are indeed epical, but whether a movie can win the Oscar or not doesn't depend on your performance alone. It has to do with the movie as well." The movie? In Women in the Movie, other than your acting skills, Mr. Chin, there are many things that needs of the movie. So I'd like to know where your confidence comes from. Are you being overconfident? Chin Guang nodded. This guy's words were much more pleasant to hear. First he acknowledged me, then he questioned me. This was a friend who understood the ways of the world. "Mr. Merlin, I don't deny that the problem you mentioned does exist. But before I left Wuxia, I said something to my employees. After all, the Oscar is for the filmmakers, not the politicians. Let's not talk about the seemingly neutral political tendency in the plot of Women. It's just a movie that tells a story. Let's refocus on the fundamental art of the movie. Let's put aside the weak points of Women and focus on my personal acting skills. My confidence comes from my acting skills. There is no other reason." After finishing his words, Chin Guang continued to look at the audience with a smile. His face was filled with calmness, but in fact, it was extremely pretentious. How could he say such a thing? This wasn't a private occasion. It was an official press conference with hundreds of reporters. Did your family know that you were so arrogant? Weren't you afraid of being beaten? Countless flashes appeared again. Countless reporters thought to themselves, "We must record the most shameless man in the world. Maybe he will drown in his own saliva tomorrow." The fourth questioner followed up Merlin's question and continued, "Mr. Chin, I've also watched Women. I admit that your acting skills are very good, but I don't think they are good enough for you to be on the podium of the Oscar." Chin Guang answered again, "That's because you've denied me from the beginning. You've been prejudiced by the first impression. I suggest you watch the movie again. Focus all your points of view on the scenes where I'm involved in. I can tell you responsibly that you will have a new feeling. In addition, please look at the book in my hand. This is the first and second volume of World School of Performing Arts, which just went on sale yesterday. It's only $39.9 and is now out of stock. If you watch the movie with the comprehensive interpretation of my acting skills in this book, you will have a different feeling." I'll say something shameless again. Many of you people in and out of the industry don't really understand my performing arts. You don't really understand it. But it doesn't matter. You read my book first and then watch my movie. The parts that you don't understand will gradually become clear. You will find that my acting skills are like the paintings of Van Gogh and Da Vinci. At first glance, they are ordinary, but when you think about them carefully, you will find that they are full of mysteries. I can even say that the acting skills I displayed in Women, and the brand new performing arts system I wrote in World Faction, once mastered by the world, will definitely bring the current human film industry one step further and reach the next level. Let me emphasize again, the Oscar is the Oscar for filmmakers. What I will bring to this industry will be revolutionary progress. So why am I not worthy of the Oscar Best Actor? As soon as Chin Guang said this, the whole Hugo Hall was silent. The reporters couldn't calm down for a long time. Some of them had watched Women, and were serious about it. They even started to analyze Chin Guang's words in their hearts. Some of them briefly read World School of Performing Arts and then put it on the shelf. At this moment they suddenly realized something and fell into deep thought. There were also those who were completely obsessed with World School of Performing Arts. Well, even though these people had received the invitation, they were still cooped up at home or in the hotel. Of course, there were also die-hard anti-fans who had never watched the movie or read the book. At this moment they were also speechless. Originally they had prepared a lot of questions to lead Chin Guang into the ditch. There was only one purpose, which was to make him say something that could be taken out of context and cause controversy. However, they never expected that before the bait they had prepared, this guy would jump into the abyss of his own accord. They couldn't even pull him back. Then, "Mr. Chin, May I ask if what you said just now can be taken as you think that the previous performing arts are just children's babbling and that your so-called World School of Performing Arts is the real performing arts? After all, there were still smart people in this world. Reporters were best at digging holes. Qin Guang turned back to look at him. Without changing his expression, he nodded and said, "Yes." "Wow. Mr. Qin, do you understand how many people you will offend with such an attitude?" "I understand, but I respect my own heart and I respect my own art even more. Just as people said when they boycotted me for the sake of performing arts. I'm also crazy for the sake of performing arts. I know where I stand. Out of my sense of responsibility, I have no reason to deny my own artistic level, because my persistence is beneficial to this era." Not only did he jump off the cliff, but he also opened the ejector on his back after jumping off the cliff. He was diving down the mountain. The huge Hugo Hall couldn't quiet down again. There was no need for the interview to continue. What kind of hole was there to dig? He himself was a giant hole. We met a madman. After a long time, Qin Guang walked out of the Hugo Hall in high spirits, leaving behind a large group of shocked reporters and countless online viewers who were watching the live broadcast. Fang Tianyu and LV Xiaoyang looked at Qin Guang's back in silence. No wonder he is the boss. "Fang Tianyu, look at my face. What happened to your face? Were you beaten?" "No, did you see a word on my face?" "What word?" "I'm impressed. By the way, Buttface, where did the boss go?" "He went to the street community to look for Mrs. Josh Tan." F***CK, is the boss going to hit a man when he's down? Buttface laughed wickedly. "Don't make it sound so bad. I think it's more appropriate to say, hit a man when he's down. You have no idea how annoying that old man named Donald Josh Tan is." 3 hours later, the storm caused by Qin Guang's nonsense at the press conference was still going strong. People in the film industry who had been humiliated wanted to buy plane tickets to Los Angeles to kill him. As for the members of the Oscar committee who were in Los Angeles, they were even more furious. If it wasn't for them going online and discovering that Qin Guang was this year's world arm wrestling champion, along with the video of Qin Guang destroying the dynamometer with a single punch uploaded by Bonner Pierce, they would have really done it. This damn Wuxia man. Despicable. Shameless. What a clown. Do you think you can get us into the cinema by doing this? In your dreams. You won't be nominated at all. We're not interested in your *T World Pie. Many people cursed and threw the brand new copies of World Pie, which they had just asked their assistants to buy, into the burning fireplace. At about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the box office statistics in Wuxia were released. It still topped 100 million yuan in a single day. The real-time box office attendance in North America in the morning dropped slightly, falling below 90%, but it was still as high as 84.7%. However, at this moment, because of Qin Guang's arrogance, the North American film industry once again reached a consensus. These people thought that Qin Guang had touched the bottom line that they should not touch. They planned to unite, shut their ears and poke their eyes blind. No matter how terrifying Qin Guang's box office was, they would never set foot in the cinema. No matter how much other people praised his books, he would never think of reading them again. The Oscars had nothing to do with the box office. You don't have the most basic respect for people in the film industry. No one has ever won an Oscar after offending all the judges. No matter how crazy you are with the yuan, it's impossible. We, the film industry, will never bow to any power. Then, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, another piece of news made this group of people, who had just made up their minds to continue to go against Qin Guang, pee their pants. Donald Josh Tan, the man who seemed to have disappeared into thin air for 3 days, suddenly appeared. On this cold and bleak day, he only wore a tie and a pair of checkered underwear. He appeared on the street openly and was running circles around his Hollywood Wuxia theater. Oh my God. They heard that Qin Guang went to chat with Jenny Josh Tan in the morning. What did he do to Mrs. Josh Tan? Old Donald, who had a tough life, what kind of crazy torture did you go through to do such a thing in this cold winter? Look at his back, running under the afternoon sun. He looked cool but in fact, extremely miserable. His fat body and the jiggling fat looked so ridiculous, like an absurd mime. Every step he took was so strenuous. He was sweating profusely, his face was flushed and he was panting. His funny tie was flying left and right in front of his exposed chest. His Scottish-style checkered underwear was hanging on his butt with difficulty. It was slightly loose and when the wind blew, it trembled endlessly. Every time he ran a few steps with difficulty, he had to stop for a moment and pull his underwear with force. Sunlight shone on his body, causing his shadow to grow even longer. More and more people noticed this ridiculous scene. They gathered around and pointed at the silver-haired Donald from afar. Donald's friends almost burst into tears. Mrs. Joshtan must have been bewitched. How could she bear to let her husband, who was highly respected in the entire North American film industry, do such a ridiculous thing? The stubborn Donald must have been tortured like a trial by the church in the Middle Ages for him to submit to such an extent. Wait, why is he smiling in the television? Why is the smile on his face so holy and calm, as if he had heard the call of the Lord? Has Donald gone mad? Oh my God! The Oscar committee members, who were highly respected and stubborn, could not help but feel sorry for Donald when they saw his tragic state. They couldn't help but feel terrified. If they continued to resist stubbornly like this, would they end up like Donald? Who gave this Wuxia man the courage to be so crazy? Aren't you afraid of the revenge of the Joshtan family and the Edward family? You're humiliating the two great families' faces. Lu Xiaoyang and Fang Tianyu looked at each other as they watched the live report from the LA TV station. What a bastard boss. Heartless. What a crazy boss. He doesn't know how to respect the old and love the young. He tramples on our traditional Wuxia virtues. Buttface, I just recorded it. You are doomed. *CK. Except for Tang Xiaokai, not many people knew that this was actually Donald's own choice. Chapter 1085. Jenny Joshtan also knew the truth of the matter, but at the moment she was also having a headache. What did I do? I didn't do anything. It was Donald who suddenly went crazy. What does it have to do with me? Jenny, are you crazy? How could you treat your husband like this? My dear father, I'm not crazy, but I'm going crazy. How could he do this to himself? I'll let you hear what he said just now. I recorded it. Donald's roar came from the phone. He wasn't angry but excited. Nobody can stop me. This is something I must do. Or else I'll regret it for the rest of my life. I dared to say that to the greatest performing artist in the history of the film industry. I won't be able to forgive myself if I don't fulfill my promise. You don't know how much I regret it. Father, did you hear that? He went crazy on his own. I couldn't stop him. I almost wanted to call the police. But now, everyone thinks that you forced him to run naked. It's okay. They'll find out the truth after a while. I don't have to explain myself. But you'll be known as a domestic abuser. Dear father, your daughter has been known to be a domestic abuser for years. Alright, as long as you can handle it well. The Edward family's reputation is very important. On the other hand, Donald was only halfway through his naked run when he was surrounded by people. He couldn't continue. Donald had to call the Wuxia Theater's security to push the crowd away so that he could continue. His clothes were so awkward, but in the cold wind, his face was strangely flushed with excitement. Not the slightest bit of coldness could be seen. Boss, why don't we go back? I'm afraid you'll catch a cold. No, you don't understand how I feel now. When a person has a strong heart, the cold can't invade his body at all. But boss, there are too many people here. Isn't this a little too? It's okay. When I decided to come here to fulfill my promise, I was already mentally prepared. To welcome the arrival of a new era in the performing arts, what's the point of my sacrifice? Boss, are you sure you didn't do this because of Madame's carrot and stick? What does this have to do with Jenny? You don't know how much he loves me. The security guards of the Wuxia Theater fell silent. What kind of horrifying domestic violence could make Mr. Joshtan say such things so calmly? Donald no longer cared about what the others were saying. He continued to run forward as he welcomed the sunlight. He looked like a teenager indulging himself in the sunset. I had to run faster. I had just finished reading the first volume and I had just gotten the second volume. I was really looking forward to how big of a surprise the second volume would give me. Donald did not care about how others viewed him. His mind was filled with Chen Guang's World School of Performing Arts. In fact, if it weren't for the fact that he was the one running the laps, it wouldn't have been a big deal in America. In the NBA and NFL, streaking was common. There were men and women, beautiful and ugly. This time it was because the person running the laps was Donald Joshtan, a big shot in the North American film industry. He was a celebrity, so the impact was huge. It was just like how the domestic violence rumors in the Joshtan family could be written into a book. Ordinary people were always interested in celebrity scandals. This was true everywhere. Tang Xiaokai did not fulfill his promise. Although he found out about it immediately, he did not contact the reporter from the New York Times. But talent from the New York Times came uninvited. This man had embarrassed himself at Chen Guang's press conference that morning. As a result, his reputation in the media world had declined. He was troubled about how to make a comeback, so he did not leave Los Angeles. Instead, he stayed directly opposite the Wuxia Theater in Hollywood. Now that the opportunity had appeared, his wait was worth it. The despicable and shameless Chen Guang had done unspeakable things to Mrs. Josh Tan, and then Mrs. Josh Tan had done even more unspeakable things to the respected Mr. Josh Tan. She had forced Mr. Josh Tan to run naked. This must be the biggest scandal in the entire film industry in the 21st century. I must let everyone see how shameless Chen Guang is. Talent blended in with the crowd happily. He gripped his camera and voice recorder tightly and squeezed his way forward with his tall and strong body. There were already reporters being stopped by the security guards of the Wuxia Theater. That was because Donald had said not to let anyone disturb him. Talent rushed to the front. Beside him was a colleague who had just returned in defeat. Talent thought to himself that he was a popular reporter from the New York Times. Usually, people would have to spend money to invite him if they wanted to organize something. He had been humiliated by Chen Guang today because Chen Guang was a country bumpkin from Wuxia. He did not know his identity or the status of the New York Times. But now it was impossible for Donald not to know. Therefore, Talent shouted at the top of his lungs, "Mr. Josh Tan. I'm Talent, a senior reporter from the New York Times. Can I interview you? I only need to take up a short 30 seconds. Talent's voice was full of energy. Even though there was a commotion in the crowd, his voice still penetrated through the countless noises and entered Donald's ears. Donald's running footsteps suddenly stopped. Talent was overjoyed. He thought to himself that the name of the New York Times was indeed useful. He was going to be rich. He would definitely be able to dig out some good news. Then Donald's originally fair white face turned even paler. He turned his head to look at Talent. F***ck. That Tang Zhonghua kid is so petty. Is he really going to put me on the cover? Someone come. Take him away. Put this guy from the New York Times on the Wuxia Theater's unwelcome list. Oh yeah, check his camera and phone. If they already have my photo in them, don't return them to him. After Donald finished speaking, he turned around and ran forward even faster as if there were a few wolves chasing after him. Talent's body became light, and his tall figure rose into the air. He was lifted up by two Wuxia Theater security guards who were even stronger and taller than him. I'm sorry, Mr. Talent. You have to come with us. Talent was dumbfounded. What? What did I do? Why are you doing this to me? We don't know either, but this is the boss's order. If there's any misunderstanding, your New York Times managing editor will personally call Mr. Josh Tan. No. This isn't fair. Why are you doing this to me? Why? Talent's screams echoed around the Wuxia Theater until he was dragged far away in the air. Donna didn't sympathize with Talent at all. Even he had lingering fears. Luckily I reacted quickly. Otherwise I would really be on the cover of Time magazine. After about half an hour, Donald finally completed his feat of running naked that shocked Los Angeles. Then he mysteriously disappeared from everyone's sight once again. This time he hid even more thoroughly. He didn't even pick up his friend's phone calls. It was only when the police received a call from his friend that they directly knocked on his door to confirm his safety. Only then did his friends feel slightly more at ease. Even so, Donald's friends in the Motion Picture Association still felt uneasy. They expressed deep sympathy for his experience, and secretly prayed for him, hoping that he could walk out of the trauma as soon as possible and secretly move to another house. Everyone knew that since Chen Guang's goal was to win the Oscar for Best Actor, he would come looking for him sooner or later. Although the final selection, nomination, and voting were randomly selected in the membership system, it was still impossible to determine who would have the right to vote when the time came. However, who knew if Chen Guang, the nouveau riche of China, would cast his net wide and catch the fish, and would rather kill the wrong person than let him go? They didn't want to admit that they were afraid. It was just a rare vacation. To a certain extent, Donald's silent protest of hiding his head and not giving any explanation was also his silent protest against Jenny's years of domestic violence. Anyway, Jenny would have to bear the blame for a while. She would probably be gentler to me in the future, right? However, it wasn't just Jenny who was having a headache. The real culprit behind Donald's streaking incident, Chen Guang, was even more dumbfounded. Under Fang Tianyu's lead, he knocked on the doors of several senior members and standing committee members of the Motion Picture Association, but the results were almost the same. Sorry, sir, my husband has gone on a long trip. Madam, is it convenient for you to tell me where Mr. Ballmer went? It's very regrettable. My husband and his friend suddenly wanted to go on a trip. The theme of their trip is returning to nature. Simply put, they didn't bring their phones. Fang Tianyu was speechless. Sorry, sir, my husband is hospitalized. My father has just gone to Africa. A middle-aged woman in her 50s said, my mother has just participated in a scientific expedition in Antarctica. She will only be back in half a month at the earliest. Another middle-aged woman in her 30s said, my grandfather has just boarded the manned spacecraft Discovery. He will be spending about 2 months in the space station. In the end, Qin Guang and Fang Tianyu nearly tore this lady's house apart. You're already in your 30s and your grandfather can still go to the space station? Why don't you just go to space? Damn it, this group of people is purposely avoiding me. Their excuses are getting more and more ridiculous. Qin Guang complained angrily. Fang Tianyu comforted him. Boss, to be honest, if I were them, I would also avoid them. Although we know what you're capable of, your attitude at the press conference this morning made us feel that you were too arrogant. Actually, this isn't a big deal. We can always find people by waving our checks. However, this old man Donna did something like this in the afternoon. They have no choice but to be afraid. Boss, is it convenient for you to tell us how you communicated with Madame Joshtan? How could she do such a thing to Donnet? Qin Guang turned to look at Fang Tianyu. After a brief moment of confusion, he came to a realization. *CK. I was wondering. What's wrong, boss? I only had a simple chat with them in Madame Joshtan's neighborhood and gave them a few of my sharpening pencils. Oh no, I mean miniature sculptures. Before I left, I only told Madame Joshtan that even though Donald's personality is terrible, it's a good thing to learn from his mistakes, so I told her not to make things difficult for him anymore. Fang Tianyu's face was full of disbelief. Then the question is, why did Donald run around naked? It can't be that he likes it, can it? Qin Guang waved his hand righteously. Nonsense, of course it's his own decision. Madame Joshtan is a disgusting but kind person. Running around naked was a bet between Donald and Tang Xiaokai. Although Tang Xiaokai and I didn't take it seriously, who knows why he would care so much. If it wasn't you, boss, who said that, I would almost believe it. Scram, scram, scram. Go somewhere cool. It's annoying. Chapter 1086. At 1 o'clock in the morning, the North American box office on the fourth day was released. The figures were even more shocking, reaching an incredible $48 million. In fact, according to past experience, a new film should have reached the upper limit on the second or third day of its release. However, because of various reasons, the box office curve of Women became abnormal, so it only reached this terrifying figure on the fourth day. Everyone in Qingguang Group naturally raised their glasses to celebrate. Whether their boss could succeed in the Olympic Games or not, at least the box office had completely exceeded their expectations. From tomorrow onwards, the box office would probably show a steady decline, but it was not a big deal. According to the current situation, Women had a great chance of breaking the $1 billion mark. It would be the first Chinese film in history to break the $1 billion mark in North America. What was even more crazy was that this was a Chinese film without English dubbing, only English subtitles. Women had raised the North American box office of a Chinese film by at least 8 times from the $128 million of the second place, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. As a domestic film, the entire production team and the leading actors were all Chinese. Women completely overturned the title of Chinese films as the poison in the box office in Europe and the United States. This achievement was unprecedented. Considering the fact that the domestic box office had broken 100 million in one day, the final domestic box office should be able to reach more than 2 billion. Although it could not be compared with the once invincible phenomenon of the New Year blockbuster, The Mermaid, it was very likely to take the second or third place in history. Most importantly, unlike Monsters of X, which had rushed to 2.4 billion in the box office, so far the domestic box office of Women had almost never been fake. As the biggest investor of the film, Qingguang Group certainly deserved a crazy celebration. If it were not for the boss's strong obsession with the Oscars, everything would have been perfect in the company in the middle of the night with a stiff face and dead fish eyes. Everyone knew that the boss did not care about money, only about the Oscars. But now the matter was stuck and the boss was annoyed. As employees, they had to accompany the boss in annoyance. In terms of publicity, everyone had tried their best. In the selection process of the Oscars, the power of the US dollar was also not to be underestimated. As long as there was an entry point, the boss could give the order and everyone would be more confident. Of course, they could also use Washington's name to curry favor. However, Fang Tianyu and Lu Xiaoyang had already mobilized the entire Qingguang Corporation's 100-man team in the United States and tried everything they could. Apart from finding 2 or 3 small fries, the big shots in the American Film Association who had a say in it had all become tortoises who had withdrawn their heads into their turtle shells. Even if they had the money, they wouldn't know where to start. It was already 3 o'clock in the morning, but the boss still locked himself in his office and did not leave. The employees in the company went back to their hotels to rest, but Lu Xiaoyang and Fang Tianyu couldn't leave. Buttface plucked up his courage and knocked on the door. Qin Guang was sitting in the leather chair, looking at the computer with a serious expression. His hands were on his waist and no one knew what he was thinking. His brows were tightly knitted, and his face was so dark that it could drip water. Buttface stepped forward. "Boss, don't worry too much. We still have a long way to go. There are still nearly 2 months before the list of nominees is submitted. There will always be light at the end of the tunnel. As long as the movie continues to be popular, even if the box office really can't affect the Oscars, you will still have a good reputation. It's impossible for the jury to turn a blind eye. It's a stain on the reputation of the Oscars." Qin Guang let out a long sigh but did not say anything. "Sigh. Boss." Lu Xiaoyang was very nervous. He had known his boss for such a long time, but he had never seen him so depressed. Could it be that the blow to him was really that heavy? Things are not looking good. Didn't Qingguang Group rely on the boss's fearlessness to get to where it was today? If the boss loses his ambition first, how can we, the employees, follow him to succeed? Qin Guang sighed again and finally said, "Damn it." The national football team had lost to Iran. There was no hope for them to advance this time. Even Silver Wolf can't save us. Lu Xiaoyang was speechless. "Damn it. I thought you were thinking about something when I saw your gloomy face. It turns out you were watching the national football team." "Forget it. When I watched the national football team, your expression was even worse than the boss's. You really need a big heart to bear the blow. Speaking of which, the boss is so athletic. Why doesn't he play football? He can beat Messi and Ronaldo in a minute." "Forget it. I don't think playing football can make more money than the boss now." While Lu Xiaoyang was letting his imagination run wild, Qin Guang turned off his computer, stood up, and stretched himself. "What's wrong? Buttface, do I look like I'm down and out?" Lu Xiaoyang shook his head vigorously. "No, you look refreshed and domineering." Qin Guang grinned. To tell you the truth, I'm not panicking. Let's just wait and see. At worst, I can buy over PricewaterhouseCoopers and do something to the general voting." Lu Xiaoyang was speechless. He really wanted to tell Qin Guang that they couldn't buy over PricewaterhouseCoopers with their current financial resources, even with the explosive box office of Women. After all, PricewaterhouseCoopers was a century-old firm. However, Qin Guang was already walking out with his head swaying. Life is lacking in everything but money. It's truly as lonely as snow. By the way, Buttface, when you are free you can help me think of something. What should I do to let the whole world know that your boss has the most perfect body on this planet? Lu Xiaoyang's eyelids twitched. "Damn it. Can you give us a break, boss? Hold an invincible party with thousands of women in one night? Then all the men in the world will regard you as their idol." When Qin Guang was about to agree, Lu Li's voice came from the glass. "If you really do that, I will drag you out and cremate you." Qin Guang's expression didn't change. "Good choice, Buttface," Lu Li continued. "I will also cremate you, by the way." Qin Guang's expression changed greatly. "What, a bad idea. If you were born in ancient times, you would definitely be a slanderer who gave advice to King Yu of Zhou." Poor Buttface didn't know that he had walked around the crematorium quietly. He just looked at Qin Guang's back and thought, my boss has become so upright all of a sudden. At 1 a.m. the next day, the domestic box office for the 4th day was released. The daily box office exceeded 100 million, but it was a little lower than the previous day. At 1 a.m. the North American box office for the 5th day was released. It was a little lower than the previous day, but it still reached $44 million. At 1 a.m. the next day, the domestic box office for the 5th day fell below $100 million to $98 million. In the past few days, Qin Guang had tried many ways to contact some big shots in the European and American film circles who could play a role in the Oscar selection process, but he had found nothing. Donald's unusual silence after his streaking really frightened many senior members of the Motion Picture Association in the European and American film circles, especially those near Los Angeles. Qin Guang didn't know what to do about it. He planned to wait for another 2 days. If it didn't work out, he would have to ask Donald, the shameless old man, to do it. D*Emin, you've already repented, but you still don't forget to trick me. Even if you want to streak, you should wait until I've settled the matter. Otherwise, you should wave the flag for me after you're done streaking, right? It's good that you're letting yourself loose, but don't trick me. Just as Qin Guang was vexed, the Qinguang group suddenly received an email from China in their corporate mailbox. Qin Guang was overjoyed when he saw it. It was a secret message from Chu Zijin. Recently, the variety show of Qinguang Media in China was in full swing, but Chu Zijin was still able to take time out of her busy schedule to solve his problems. She had sent him some data that she had secretly obtained by using her expertise as the world's top hacker to break through the firewall of Demi Telecom. The data was a comprehensive analysis of the recent call records of the mansion that Qin Guang had visited a few days ago. All the call records pointed to almost the same place. It was located thousands of kilometers away, almost in the easternmost part of the United States, in Princeton, New Jersey. This bunch of old bastards, in order to shirk responsibility, they actually hid from the west coast to the east coast. They really hid far and deep. If it wasn't for the fact that I have a super hacker at home, I really wouldn't be able to do anything to you. Square Skull, book me a plane ticket immediately. I'm flying to New Jersey. With a wave of his hand, Qin Guang officially launched the Qin family army's eastbound expedition. Let's see where you can run to. After making up his mind, there was nothing left for him to do in Los Angeles anyway. Qin Guang was now pursuing efficiency, so of course he left. That afternoon he took a direct flight to New Jersey. The benefits of being the recipient of the Global Civil Aviation Association's Hero Medal were obvious now. No matter when he wanted to buy a plane ticket, he could always buy the earliest flight and it was free. Qin Guang only brought Fang Tianyu with him on this trip. All the other employees of the Qinguang group stayed in Los Angeles. The so-called mighty Qin family army consisted of 2 people, and the commander was none other than Qin Guang. Vanguard General, Tiger Leopard Cavalry, Logistics, Miscellaneous Soldier, Servant, Comfort Man, all these titles added up to one person, and that person was Fang Tianyu. Although Fang Tianyu's previous relationships were mostly destroyed, at least he could still call out his name when he met him. The 2 of them left quietly and did not make a big fuss. Even many people in the company did not know that Qin Guang had already left. It was already past 8 at night when they arrived in New Jersey. The sky was getting dark and the 2 of them quietly found a place to stay. They were prepared to go straight to the Eaton Manor where the big shots of the American Film Association were absconding the next morning. This group of big shots from the Film Association was quite interesting. They were so relaxed even when they were on the run. They actually agreed to go to a large holiday manor in New Jersey to eat, drink and have fun. This Eaton Manor had a great background. It was located on the outskirts of Princeton City, close to several universities, and had a rich cultural atmosphere. The manor covered an area of more than 500 acres. It was lush with trees, green grass and flowers bloomed all year round. The scenery was pleasant. The manor had a racetrack, an opera house, a golf course, a bar, a coffee shop, a movie theater, and other entertainment facilities. There were also dozens of detached villas of various shapes and sizes. This place was roughly equivalent to a high-end club in China, but the interior was more luxurious and focused more on enjoyment. It was filled with a strong smell of capitalism and corruption. Usually, the guests were celebrities from all walks of life in Europe and the United States, as well as celebrities from all walks of life. Even Zuckerberg, who had supported Qin Guang in the past, and people like Mouthy Cannon Connor often brought their families here for holidays. The people from the Film Association could be considered to be very influential. They even asked for a 7-story villa with more than 100 rooms for an impromptu gathering. Despicable. So corrupt that it makes my hair stand on end. Fang Tianyu sat in front of a chair and took out his Sophie tablet to search for the situation of the Eaton Manor on the internet. He could not help but complain crazily the moment he saw the bird's eye view. Qin Guang quietly took Fang Tianyu's tablet from the side and did not comment. He thought to himself, I've been set up by Donnet too badly. I'm being unjustly made a scapegoat. What's more infuriating is that I can't even scold Donnet. I'll make this bastard compensate me when I'm almost done with my business. I'll use your handprint wall. I'll have to perform a full set of the 18 dragons subduing palms to vent my anger. Forget it, these are all minor matters. I'll set off to stop them tomorrow morning. Fang Tianyu, is the car ready? We'll drive there tomorrow. Got it, boss. Don't worry about me. Boss, come and see, there's a photo of a big shot in the film industry taking a plane with 3 supermodels. It's been posted online. He must be at the Eaton Manor too. This is too shameful. 3 fresh flowers stuck in cow dung. Chen Guang silently looked at his only follower, Fang Tianyu, and sighed to himself. He thought to himself, other people take supermodels but I take a Fang Tianyu. Comparisons are odious. So here's the problem. Should I sneak in or not? Chapter 1087. After hesitating for a long time, Chen Guang couldn't bear it anymore. He didn't feel bad for Fang Ji, he felt bad for himself. That night the two went to bed early. Neither of them was in the mood to look at the North American box office. Of course it was in a different room. The next day the two woke up at 6 in the morning. Chen Guang immediately drove from Newark to Princeton. At around 7:30 in the morning, it was the time for Princeton's morning news. Chen Guang and Fang Tianyu stood side by side at the gate of Eaton Manor. The top-notch Lincoln that was worth hundreds of thousands of dollars couldn't exempt Chen Guang and Fang Tianyu from the security check at Eaton Manor. Fortunately, the two had already used Tang Xiaokai's personal connections to get an invitation to Eaton Manor yesterday. The car also belonged to the Eaton Manor's lifetime membership. The two only rolled down the window and showed their faces. They then flashed the invitation and were immediately let in. Why don't we climb over the wall? Wouldn't we be able to catch them off guard? Fang Tianyu, who was sitting in the car, was puzzled. Chen Guang turned his head and looked at the guy sitting in the passenger seat. He was wrapped up like a dumpling in the winter after Christmas. Because your behavior is too suspicious. If we get recognized after climbing over the wall, I can't afford to lose face. Fang Tianyu was speechless for a while. After a while he said worriedly, they won't run away after hearing us, right? Chen Guang shook his head and said, not likely. We might be shameless but they are. After all, they're all famous people. It's already ridiculous for them to hide from me from Los Angeles to Princeton. I'm not a monster and I don't eat people. There's no reason for them to be so afraid of me. Otherwise, how would they be able to face others? Fang Tianyu nodded and said, makes sense. Hey, it's that old castle-like building over there. Yeah, I see it. 5 minutes later, the two of them looked at each other in dismay as they stared at the empty castle-style villa that was in a mess. Chen Guang had never imagined that this group of so-called upper-class people would be as timid as a mouse. 5 minutes ago, when their car arrived at the foot of the villa, they were temporarily stopped outside by the bodyguards at the gate. It was not until Chen Guang crushed the big iron gate railing of the courtyard of the villa and snatched away the gun from the hand of a reckless guy who tried to take out a gun in a lightning speed and learned from the trick of the fire cloud evil god that he fired at his own temple and then used 2 fingers of his other hand to clamp the bullet. Only then did he completely control the situation. Ignoring Fang Tianyu's admiring gaze, Chen Guang threw a domineering sentence at the bodyguards. Although I'm suspected of trespassing, I came to visit with good intentions. I, Chen Guang, am a celebrity in the United States. It's impossible that you don't know me. You should be able to guess why I'm here. I'm warning you one last time. Whoever dares to pull out a gun will die. The American law is a very interesting thing. Under normal circumstances, it can be manipulated by the power of money. For example, although it looks like I'm trespassing, my lawyer will also defend me in court because I'm a celebrity. If I kill someone, it should be 100% judged as self-defense, right? Then the two of them swaggered into the villa and saw a scene that gave him a headache. On the long table in the hall on the first floor of the villa was a half-eaten breakfast. Half of the bread was thrown on the table or on the ground, and the TV was still playing Princeton's morning city news. Then the two of them went straight upstairs. Most of the doors were left open and the bedding inside was still warm. This scene looked like a city that was suddenly attacked by the German Blitzkrieg during World War II. The people who used to live in these rooms and the people who were eating breakfast downstairs had fled in panic, one could easily guess. Chen Guang and Fang Tianyu went downstairs and asked him, Fang Tianyu, do I look scary? Fang Tianyu shook his head and said, no boss, you're a kind person. You win people over with your virtue. Chen Guang nodded and said, yeah, these people are avoiding me like I'm a monster. Fang Tianyu silently turned his face to the side, thinking that a walking and living fire cloud evil god was probably no different from a scourge or ferocious beast. At this moment, hundreds of people from the Motion Picture Association, who were hiding in the underground monitoring room of the villa, felt the same way as Fang Tianyu. About half of these people were neatly dressed, with breadcrumbs and milkshakes hanging from the corners of their mouths. The other half were more embarrassed. They were wearing all kinds of underwear, and the crowded and narrow and dark basement was filled with the smell of old hormones. However, at this time, the people inside didn't care about how they were dressed. Instead, they all stared at the monitor and couldn't speak for a long time. Mr. Nicholas, wasn't what the Wuxia man did a stunt we added in the movie? The Matrix? Bullet time? Quicksilver? I think he's more powerful than Quicksilver. When he shot, the muzzle was less than 30 centimeters away from his head. His left hand was still in his pocket. I told you this Chinese man is evil. Shut up. What era is this? Do you really think there are vampires and dark wizards in this world? I'm Nicholas, but I don't even know the existence of vampires. But how do you explain this Chinese man's action? Forget it, it doesn't matter. Anyway, we just hide here and don't go out. Damn it, why aren't these two leaving? Do they want to finish watching the morning news? *T, it's so cold. On the other side, Qin Guang and Fang Tianyu were sitting in the hall on the first floor of the villa, casually picking some long bread, eggs and milk from the long buffet table. The two left in a hurry in the morning and didn't have time to eat breakfast. Now was the time to make up for it. The sound from the TV rang in Qin Guang's ears, but his eyes were on the phone in front of him. On the other side of the world it was past 8 p.m. in China. Chu Zijin had just finished a busy day and was taking a short break in her hotel room in Yanjing. But she was also a person who couldn't stay idle. She sat on the chair and typed quickly on the keyboard, chatting with Qin Guang on WeChat. Did you find them? I found them, but I can't find them. Qin Guang reported his current situation to Chu Zijin. My international friends are too rude. They ran away without even putting on their pants. God knows where they are right now. I'll have to trouble you to help me dig 3 feet underground again. Otherwise, I'll have to summon some special agents from the country. They're the best at hiding and whatnot. Chu Zijin replied after a few minutes, I know where they are. Qin Guang was overjoyed. Where? They're about 50 meters below you. The Eaton Manor's villa was really creative. They even considered extreme wartime situations. They even have something as magical as a shelter. Do you want to see what's inside? I've successfully hacked into the Eaton Manor's central control system. Qin Guang nodded and opened a WeChat video call with Chu Zijin. What came into view was a variety of colorful underwear that looked like the national flag. This group of people was surrounded in the middle. Behind them was another group of neatly dressed people who looked equally disheveled. It was a brightly lit but slightly creepy room. Right in front of everyone was a huge computer monitor. It showed Qin Guang and Fang Tianyu sitting in the hall. Ugh, so miserable. Even though Qin Guang was the instigator, he felt a little embarrassed seeing such an embarrassing scene. Friends, I'm really just here to talk. I really don't intend to do anything unspeakable to you. Don't be like this. I admit that my idea of winning an Oscar is a little crazy, but I'm not completely unreasonable. I've even written a monograph on my world-class acting skills. My contributions in the field of performing arts and my contributions in the field of linguistics are definitely on par. It's just an Oscar. Every year. Your miserable faces make me look like a big villain. That's not appropriate. Fang Tianyu leaned over. Boss, what's this? A gay film? Qin Guang looked back at him. No, it's the people from the Motion Picture Association. They're dressed like this and hiding underground. *CK. How much hatred do they have? What should we do now? Drag them out and reason with them? Qin Guang shook his head at first but then nodded. He couldn't make up his mind. It wasn't easy to trap everyone here. He was a little reluctant to let go of this opportunity. But after all, they were all so-called celebrities, especially some of them who were almost 70 or 80 years old, but they were still shivering in the cold in the shelter wearing such skimpy clothes. Uncle couldn't bear to do this and neither could Auntie. Am I really that bad? Right at this moment, a voice resounded from the television behind Qin Guang. Here's an important piece of news. Princeton Laboratory announced that the culprit of the lab sample theft case voluntarily surrendered 3 days ago and has been handed over to the Princeton police. Because the case involves a Chinese person, Princeton has contacted the Chinese embassy. After many negotiations, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Science and Technology have agreed to formally file a lawsuit today. They will sue the Chinese Zhujiangxi for theft, espionage, stealing trade secrets and many other crimes. If convicted, the Chinese Zhujiangxi will face a minimum of 5 years in prison. The trial will officially start at the Princeton District Court at 10 o'clock in the morning. Welcome to Princeton Morning City News. This is the end of this broadcast. 2 seconds later, Qin Guang shot up from his seat and yelled, *CK. Fang Tianyu's attention was still on Qin Guang's phone. He didn't hear the broadcast behind him. What's wrong, boss? Qin Guang immediately ran out. This old man must be the son of destiny. Let's not talk about anything else and let's not care about this matter for now. Let's go. Fang Tianyu jogged behind him. He was confused. What's going on? Where are we going? Qin Guang looked back at him. There was a hint of madness in his calm expression. We're robbing the execution ground. What? Fang Tianyu was stunned. He then said in confusion, what's going on? What the hell is robbing the execution ground? Like in the TV series? This is going to cause a war. Qin Guang said fiercely, I'd rather betray the Americans than the Americans betray me. How dare they sentence me? So what if it's a war? Didn't you hear the news on the TV? Zhuo Jingxi is in Princeton right now. She's going to court soon. She might be sentenced to 20 years in prison. Fang Tianyu's mind was filled with 1,000 muffled thunders. He thought, this is too big. Chapter 1088. Zhuo Jingxi did not stay in the cold detention room. Instead, she was placed under house arrest in a 5-star hotel in the center of Princeton. There were a total of 6 groups of people guarding the door. They were the legal staff of the Princeton Laboratory, the staff of the American Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Science and Technology, and the staff of the Princeton District Court and local law enforcement agencies. The last group consisted of a total of 4 Asian people, 1 woman and 3 men. The woman looked to be in her 40s. She had fair skin, phoenix eyes and willowy eyebrows. She wore a simple gray trench coat. This middle-aged woman was very beautiful, but the strange thing was that there was a murderous aura in her eyes that could not be ignored. The other 3 men all had clean, square faces. Their skin was tanned from the sun, and they looked very strong. Their bodies were filled with the aura of a soldier. Apart from the 4 Wuxia people themselves, no one else knew who they were. When they arrested Zhuo Jingxi the day before yesterday, the Princeton local law enforcement agents tried to get the 4 Chinese people to leave. They said that people who had nothing to do with the case should not be there. The 2 sides almost had a conflict because of this. However, the strange thing was that when the atmosphere was tense, the 3 Chinese men did not attack the Princeton agents. Instead, they desperately surrounded the middle-aged woman. However, the 3 men did not seem to want to protect her at all. They seemed to want to stop her from doing something. When the conflict broke out, the woman's expression did not change at all. She looked at the others as if they were dead. The 2 sides did not really fight because the Princeton officials suddenly received a call from the Pentagon. On the phone, a senior CIA official told them to exercise restraint and repeatedly stressed that this was not a simple intellectual property dispute. They could not let the suspects in the theft case be mistreated or mistreated. All trial procedures must strictly follow the rules and regulations. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. The Princeton personnel tried to find out the origins of the 4 Chinese people and the suspects. They wanted to know if they were Chinese personnel working for foreign affairs. They did not get an answer. They were only warned repeatedly not to try to provoke the other party. Even Zhuo Jingxi, who secretly flew back to New Jersey with Qin Guang on her back, did not know who the 4 people were. She clearly felt that she had left very discreetly and cautiously, and did not tell anyone about it. But inexplicably, from the moment she boarded the plane, these 4 people had been sitting next to her. At the time, she didn't notice, but after she got off the plane, the 4 of them followed her closely. The 3 men even took the initiative to help her carry her bag, and the woman came over to chat with her, exchanging some women's skin care and maintenance tips. Zhuo Jingxi immediately became vigilant. Those who were unaccountably solicitous were hiding evil intentions. At that time, her attitude was very cold, and she immediately kept a distance from these people. However, it was useless. The other party was unmoved. Wherever he went, they followed him. The only difference was that they didn't use superglue to stick them together. If it weren't for the fact that she was here to turn herself in, Zhuo Jingxi almost wanted to call 911. But later, especially after she was controlled by Prince's laboratory, Zhuo Jingxi understood that they were here to protect her. She could roughly guess that Qin Guang's status was not what it used to be, and her relationship with Qin Guang was not ordinary. Perhaps without his deliberate instructions, her personal safety must have been the focus of some people, especially after she went abroad. Sitting in the room, Zhuo Jingxi sighed again. She wanted to help him, but she didn't expect that not only would she not be able to help him, but she also caused him trouble. Prince's laboratory was too tough, and there was no room for negotiation. If I had known this would happen, I wouldn't have returned to America. I was too naive. Zhuo Jingxi looked at the television blankly, which was playing news related to her. She didn't know what the country thought of her matter. Perhaps it was just a flash in the eyes of ordinary people, and it wouldn't cause too much of a stir. But obviously, since the special security had caught up, this matter must have caused a stir at a higher level. She sighed again. It's all my fault. I wanted to do this too much. Although Chen Guang said he didn't care, he had already done so much preparatory work at the Tangshan factory. He even ruined the factory's reputation. How could he not care? Zhu Jingxi knew Chen Guang very well. Although he was leaving, he still couldn't give up. That was why she sneaked back to the United States. But now she realized that she thought things were too simple. She thought that with the knowledge in the field of photocatalysis that she learned from Chen Guang, as long as she threw a little bit of bait, she would be able to make Prince's academic director obediently give in and allow her to use the resources of Prince's laboratory to produce the 5 God-level formulas. They would also no longer hold her responsible for stealing the samples. She never expected that as soon as she arrived in Princeton, she would be firmly controlled by the law enforcement agency that suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Prince had no intention of communicating with her at all. They just wanted to send her to court and make an example out of her. She couldn't even meet the higher-ups of the laboratory who understood technology and knowledge. She could only deal with the stern-faced legal department who didn't understand knowledge. How could she throw out the bait? Was she supposed to talk to these uniformed police detectives or lawyers about photocatalysis? They only had one goal, and that was to send her to court. They wouldn't listen to her brag about the next era of photocatalysis. After all, Prince was a big company. Although Zhu Jingxi was a rare young scientist, she was still too small in front of the behemoth Prince laboratory. In addition, there was a deeper reason behind Prince's ruthless actions this time. In recent years, there were many senior researchers who returned to China with foreign cutting-edge technology. The United States couldn't do anything about this. They didn't use the Chinese, but the Chinese were indeed good at learning and were exceptionally useful. As for the Wuxia people, their temperament would make it easy for them to abandon their accumulations here and return to the 9.6 million square kilometers of land after they had achieved success in their studies. They didn't care about being despised by the mainstream scientific community in the future. They only wanted to use whatever they learned. Because of this, the scientific community in Europe and the United States protested and sued, but basically all of them were useless. In addition, as China continued to rise and become more and more powerful in the international arena, the returned talents were still secretively used in the military and other high-end industries that were separated from the people's livelihood. In recent years, China had become more and more unscrupulous in this regard. There were also more and more technology leaks and outflows in the people's livelihood. The European and American industries were angry but did not dare to say anything. However, they could not use the patent lawsuits that were common in the world to crush Chinese companies. This was because China was getting stronger day by day. It was very strong in military, politics, economy, and other aspects. There was almost no bottom line for the protection of technology talents. They couldn't deal with it by force, kidnapping, or even assassinating people like they did to other third-world countries. They could only go to court. Patent lawsuits were difficult, and transnational patent lawsuits were even more difficult. Patent lawsuits from Europe and the United States to China were the most difficult. What Zhu Jingxi did this time was actually not uncommon. It was just that her behavior was worse. Not only did she go back, but she also brought back samples. Originally, Prince couldn't do anything to her, but he didn't expect her to walk right into the trap. Because of this, as the leader of the European and American research institutions, Prince did not hesitate to use Zhu Jingxi as a model. His purpose was to deter other Chinese researchers who were eager to make trouble, to prevent similar situations from happening one after another. The morning news ended. Zhu Jingxi looked back at the clock on the wall. It was already 8:30 in the morning. She squeezed the notebook in her hand, hesitating if she should write down a formula in the notebook and throw it out in court. But she quickly shook her head and gave up on this idea. Prince's higher-ups wouldn't appear in court. Even if she wrote down the formula, no one would be able to understand it. She couldn't prove her innocence because she wasn't innocent to begin with. Besides, even if Prince's technical backbone was present, they wouldn't be able to understand the formula without a long explanation. Zhu Jingxi wasn't worried about the formula leaking. Even if someone had the chemical formula in their hands and didn't know the synthesis method, it was impossible to synthesize the product by luck. Others would only treat it as their own sophistry and imagination, thinking that it was nonsense. No matter how talented a human was, there was a limit. An individual couldn't possibly be above a large scientific research institution like Prince. At 9 o'clock in the morning, there was a gentle knock on the door. Zhu Jingxi sighed and stood up. It was time to go to court. Forget it, it's my responsibility and I have to admit it. If I go to jail, so be it. Right now, Chen Guang should still be busy with his Oscars in Los Angeles, right? When he's done and hears that I'm in jail in America, he'll definitely be furious, right? Thinking about it carefully, as a teacher, she really wasn't as mature as her student. She was too naive. Zhuo Jingxi wasn't particularly afraid. She knew that Qin Guang definitely wouldn't ignore her. All of her crimes seemed appalling, but at the end of the day, there was only one word that could solve it: compensation. The research and development cost of the samples taken away was more than $10 million. With Qin Guang's current financial resources, this wasn't a big problem. Zhuo Jingxi knew that he would definitely take care of this matter. Whether or not he paid in the end, he would definitely have a way. It was just that the more Qin Guang did, the more stupid and childish she seemed. This made her feel extremely embarrassed. In addition, she couldn't help but admire Qin Guang's foresight. If it weren't for the 4 special Chinese escorts outside the door, she probably wouldn't be comfortably under house arrest in the hotel. Instead, she would be lying on a cold iron bed in a detention center. "My sister up, please." The staff of the Princeton District Court looked at Zhuo Jingxi with a smile as she opened the door. Then he raised his hand to stop the hand of another agent next to him that was trying to reach out with the handcuffs, signaling him to put it away. Zhuo Jingxi nodded and walked out first. The remaining 10 or 20 staff members were about to surround her, but the 4 Chinese people, 3 men and 1 woman, quietly stood behind Zhuo Jingxi and didn't let the rest of the people get close. The lawyer from the Princeton Laboratory's legal department saw this and was a little unhappy. However, the court staff next to him comforted him. "My sister doesn't show any signs of escaping. This case itself is more related to commercial crimes. She doesn't pose a threat to others, so of course there's no need to wear handcuffs." A little further in front, the official in charge of this matter from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs whispered, "Miss Zhuo, are you sure you don't need to hire a lawyer? Then I'm afraid you'll have to hire a public lawyer." Zhuo Jingxi thought to herself, "Ever since I arrived in Princeton, I've been under house arrest. My phone has been confiscated. How am I supposed to find a lawyer?" At this moment, a Chinese man standing behind Zhuo Jingxi interrupted. "The embassy has already hired a law firm for Miss Zhuo. The lawyer and the jury arrived in Princeton last night." Whatever. Zhuo Jingxi didn't comment on this. The evidence of the case was conclusive, and Princeton also had surveillance cameras. The samples that she brought back were confiscated at the time, and her fingerprints were all on them. With all the witnesses and material evidence, even if she found the legal team that defended Simpson, they wouldn't be able to prove her innocence. It didn't matter whether she had a lawyer or not. On the other hand, Qin Guang and Fang Qianyu, who had already arrived at the Princeton District Court in advance, instantly became extremely busy. "Fang Qianyu, you just contacted a lawyer, right? Make it clear, I want the best lawyer in the United States. Fees are not a problem." Boss, aren't we going to rob the execution ground? Isn't that right?" "Then who were you talking to on the phone just now? Didn't you say that they would be here soon?" The boss of the Chinese mafia in New Jersey. I asked for a few gunmen." "Qin Guang, are you an idiot? If I really wanted to rob the execution ground, why would I need gunmen? I alone am equivalent to an army. Get a lawyer. Quick." Chapter 1089. Fang Qianyu hurriedly called the Chinese big shot in New Jersey. The other party was also stubborn and had a close relationship with Fang Qianyu in the past. Even though they knew that it was a robbery, they actually managed to pull out a lineup of 4 to 5 smuggled outlaws in just a few minutes. These people were also stubborn. When they heard that they were going to attack the Princeton District Court, they were not afraid at all. Then again, there's bound to be a brave man with a great reward, and that big shot knew that Fang Qianyu was working for Qin Guang. The boss also knew that Qin Guang was a rich man, and he knew that Qin Guang did not lack money. When he found a gunman, he also thought that if there was a high reward, there would be a brave man. Everyone knew that Boss Qin did not lack money, and there was no way they would lose out if they worked for him. As long as they could get things done and solve Boss Qin's problem, the world was big and there was nowhere they couldn't go. Not to mention that they were illegal immigrants. But after losing so many of his capable subordinates, he didn't dare to earn Qin Guang's money. In the end, he felt a little reluctant in his heart. Fortunately, Fang Qianyu immediately called again. He did not want a gunman but a lawyer. The boss was overjoyed. "Gunmen are my profession, but lawyers are my old friends. How can people who do underground work in America not have a good relationship with lawyers?" He immediately said, "Brother Fang, give me 5 minutes. I have a good friend in Princeton." "Okay, thank you." After hanging up the phone, Fang Qianyu thought for a bit. He did not rush to call Tang Xiaokai again. He wanted to see if the people that Tang Xiaokai found were good enough. On the other hand, Qin Guang had already run out of the court. He cursed, Motherf asterisk her, they said it was a public trial but they didn't let me in. They said I'm not their citizen. Fang Tianyu looked at him silently. Boss, this is their territory after all. Qin Guang stared at him and said, but they want to interrogate Chinese people. This is an international incident, and they are not following the rules. Fang Tianyu was speechless. He thought to himself, boss, you're the one who doesn't follow the rules. In fact, if it weren't for the fact that he knew that he was in the wrong, Qin Guang really wanted to rush in during the trial to get her out. He was 100% sure that even if he forcibly took them away in court, no one in America would dare to say a word. Come on, why don't you try touching me? If the Vice Minister of Wuxia stomped his foot here, do you dare touch a finger of mine? Well, I'm not at the vice ministerial level anymore. Forget it, this was not important. Although the old man was no longer in power, his influence was still there. The most important thing was that the USA would not dare to use extreme measures against him. They did not have the ability to do so. It was just like when America's own minister came to China. Not only did he not expose his identity, but once he brought out his name, police cars lined the streets to welcome him. If you push me too far, I can show you the power of a martial sage. He wasn't afraid of ordinary firearms, but they definitely wouldn't dare to use their killing weapons on him. The matter could only be left unsettled. Although Qin Guang was confident in his heart, he had no intention of falling out with Su Tao. Qin Guang did not need to ask why Zhuo Jingxi came to Princeton without telling him. She came for the equipment and raw materials in Prince's laboratory. She had good intentions and had the confidence to negotiate, but Prince's laboratory's reactions were too arrogant. They either didn't believe Zhuo Jingxi's words at all, or they simply hadn't communicated with her on the subject of knowledge. However, since she was here and she was wronged, Qin Guang felt that as a man, he had to protect Teacher Zhuo's feelings and fight to make her happy. This was the sublimation of the ultimate realm of picking up a girl. Not only did he have to conquer her academically, he could not let her suffer the slightest bit, and he had to take care of her emotionally. If she had already been wronged because of a moment of carelessness, it didn't matter. You're my man, I'll get back at you. What my woman does, even if it's wrong, must be right. Even if the whole world thinks she's wrong, I must make her right. In any case, she really needed the 5 god-level photocatalyst formulas. Prince had the ready-made stuff anyway. Since Teacher Zhuo had flown over from so far away, she had to really get this done. It would give her a sense of accomplishment and make her feel that this trip was not in vain. Therefore, when Qin Guang was chased away by the court, he did not lose his temper. He asked Fang Tianyu to find a lawyer. The two waited for a few more minutes before the Chinese mafia boss called back. He gave Fang Tianyu a phone number and said that he was already on his way here. You found a lawyer? Isn't he awesome? Fang Tianyu nodded fiercely. Super awesome. The partner of Baker Law Firm, the super awesome kind. Qin Guang was skeptical. Which team is better than Simpson's team? Boss, your request is too much. That's a dream team. Any one of them is a big shot among big shots. Although boss, you have the financial resources to build a dream team, time is a little tight. Where are you going to find so many powerful people in such a short amount of time? But Baker Law Firm really can't be underestimated. They are now the largest law firm in the world. If you give them 3 more days, they can really create a dream team as strong as the Simpson case. Of course, there's another condition. We have to make sure that our budget is sufficient. These people are so expensive that it's like they're robbing us. Qin Guang asked, can they earn as much as me? Fang Tianyu shook his head fiercely. No. Since it's the largest law firm in the world, their connections must be good. Let's count on the people here first and see how it goes. Alright, call the embassy immediately. No matter what, let's protest first. We have to go to court to participate in the trial. What's the point of waiting outside? This was the good thing about having subordinates. Letting Qin Guang handle this matter himself would take him a few minutes just to find the embassy's phone number. About half an hour later, the two of them sat in the middle of the Princeton District Court's hall under the strong protest of the Chinese embassy. It was exactly 9:30 a.m., half an hour before Zhuo Jingxi's trial. Qin Guang was not panicking. While he had asked Fang Tianyu to contact the embassy, he had also contacted the Guangdong General Administration. The negotiations with Prince's laboratory might have fallen through, but there was still the possibility of making a big news. No matter how powerful he was still alone. He did not have 3 heads and 6 arms. It was always better to bring a few special people along just in case. When he made the call, he was completely at ease. He could not help but feel comforted by Xan Qin's reliable work. Teacher Zhuo actually had an expert by his side even without his orders. It was the leader of the Flower sect, which was relatively strong among the 27 sections. She was known as Auntie Mei. She was an expert at the peak of skin strength, Mei Shangshu. Although Zhuo Jingxi said that she had been under house arrest for more than 2 days, she had actually been served well and had not suffered any grievances. It was all thanks to Auntie Mei, a senior in the pugilistic world, who had lowered herself to protect her. He heard that Auntie Mei had volunteered. He did not know if she had too much free time in the country and wanted to go abroad for a stroll or something. Of course, Qin Guang felt that it was more likely that his charisma was too strong, which made Auntie Mei have the urge to worship him. In short, it was a false alarm and everything was fine. In addition, Fang Tianyu also confirmed another thing with the embassy. The embassy had also prepared a team of lawyers for Zhuo Jingxi. Although it seemed that there was no hope of a comeback, they had prepared all the information in the past 2 days. The two sides contacted each other. Lawyer Pizarro from the Baker law firm had not yet arrived, but he had already become the boss of this temporary team of lawyers. The people found by the embassy had no objections. The Baker law firm and Pizarro were both well known. They were eager to have a chance to contact Pizarro through this case. At 9:45, Pizarro did not come to the courtroom. Instead, he directly contacted the team of lawyers found by the embassy, who were contacting the defendant, Zhuo Jingxi. As expected of a top lawyer with a reputation, it took him less than 10 minutes to understand the information prepared by the defense team and come to a particularly painful conclusion in his heart. To win this case was as difficult as winning an Oscar for his employer, Qin Guang. In short, there was no chance at all. Pizarro was a little shaken. If he had known this would happen, he would not have taken this case. Although there was no agreement, if he went back on his word, it would be equivalent to offending both the Chinese mafia boss and Qin Guang. Thinking about the fate of the poor old Donald Josh Tan, whose social status was not lower than his, the lawyer did not have the courage to quit. He did not want to see the explosive news of him running around naked on the internet tomorrow. Forget it, I'll just bite the bullet and do it, Pizarro thought. At 9:55, the courtroom was already filled with all kinds of people. There were reporters, ordinary people, and even some students and professors from nearby universities came to watch the show. Some well-informed people recognized Qin Guang and could not help but be confused. Wasn't this Chinese man busy with his movie in Los Angeles? What was he doing here? Needless to say, Women was a really good movie. Mr. Qin, can I have your autograph? I'm a loyal fan of yours. Your movie is amazing. An old professor said. Qin Guang signed it for him on account of his age. Mr. Qin, can I take a photo with you? Last night, I went to watch your movie with my classmates. We all think you have a good chance of winning an Oscar. It was a brown-haired girl with big wavy hair. She was probably of Mexican descent. Qin Guang also took a photo with her because of her good looks, big breasts and good voice. Qin Guang, can I beat you up? *CK off. This idiot was obviously a fan of William Jones. Hello, Mr. Qin, I'm a reporter from New Jersey Weekly. May I ask why you are here? You were in Los Angeles yesterday and you're in Princeton today. Is it a coincidence? You're both Chinese, do you know each other? No comment. I'm a reporter from Pan American Technology newspaper. Go away, I'm not doing interviews today. Qin Guang was annoyed and was about to lose his temper. However, the judge came in early and saved him. The judge banged his hammer heavily, signaling the people to be quiet. This was a court and they had to maintain silence. At 10 a.m. sharp, Zhuo Jingxi entered the courtroom from the side door accompanied by many people. Chapter 1090. Zhuo Jingxi's expression was calm until she saw Qin Guang waving at her from within the crowd. Her expression changed in an instant. First, she looked pleasantly surprised, then she blushed and turned her head away as if she was ashamed to see anyone. After a few seconds, she turned back and looked at Qin Guang apologetically. Her eyes seemed to be able to speak. I'm sorry I've caused you trouble again. Qin Guang felt that it would be a pity if Zhuo Jingxi didn't become an actor with her ability to change expressions. It was obvious that Pizarro had been busy talking and hadn't told Zhuo Jingxi that he was actually hired by Qin Guang. Zhuo Jingxi saw that Pizarro was leading the team and thought that he was the head lawyer hired by the embassy. When Zhuo Jingxi finally calmed down and sat in the defendant's stand, Qin Guang winked at her to calm her down. He didn't say anything else and just planned to wait and see. But from their simple eye contact and body language, everyone in the courtroom could tell that they were in cahoots. The judge secretly tidied his wig and felt a headache coming on. This was a major case involving foreign countries, and it seemed to involve a big shot from China. Prince's laboratory thought that they had a soft persimmon, but it turned out to be a hornet's nest. The most tragic thing was that because of the special circumstances, the judge couldn't reveal the inside story for the time being. As early as yesterday, he had started to feel pressure from all sides, including the will of the White House and the Pentagon. The political forces wanted him to get a lighter sentence, but the scientific community wanted him to get a harsher sentence. Both sides were big shots and he felt very uncomfortable being stuck in the middle. Besides, some forces from China, including the attitude of the Chinese embassy, could also influence his decisions. But now there's another Chinese celebrity, Qin Guang, who has been causing a huge commotion in America. Naturally, this matter would become more complicated. Prince's legal department and the prosecution's team had also noticed Qin Guang's existence. Furthermore, they had also recognized Pizarro, the leader of the defense team. Pizarro was famous for his ability to distort black and white. The plaintiff thought to himself that they were a little unprepared. Although the evidence was extremely beneficial to them in terms of status in the Jianghu, they could barely fight Pizarro to a draw. If he had known this would happen, he would have hired a big-shot lawyer from the Ohua law firm. Forget it, the current situation is that they have the absolute advantage. As long as they fight the lawsuit step by step, they should not lose. This was a public trial that received a lot of attention. Although it was not broadcasted live on television to protect the privacy of the accused, there was no shortage of live text broadcasts throughout the country. In addition, there were countless pairs of eyes in the scientific community, waiting for the good news. If he lost a lawsuit like this, his law firm would never receive any more big business from the scientific community. I can't lose. At 10 o'clock in the morning, the public trial began on time. Of course, Zhuo Jingxi did not stand there shackled like a normal defendant. Instead, she sat behind the defendant's stand shyly, guiltily, and calmly. Pizarro had asked her to try not to talk in court. If she was asked about her motive for taking away the sample, she should try to say that it was unintentional. She could say that she had accidentally taken the wrong bottle when she was packing up her cosmetics. Although it was obviously a lie, the purpose of a lawyer's existence was to turn lies into facts. The suspect did not even realize that she had taken the wrong bottle. There was a huge difference between intentional and unintentional. Then why was there a few grams of the sample missing? What's so strange about that? She had found out that she had taken the wrong bottle after returning to China, but she had wanted to get it back as soon as possible. She had left it anywhere and someone had mistaken it for a face cream. What? You're asking who used it again? Where is the sample that was used as a face cream? You'll have to ask China's drainage system. Pizarro dared to come up with such a strategy because of his brief communication with Zhuo Jingxi. Although she had been briefly questioned in the past 2 days, she had never said anything. Next, it was time for the plaintiff, Prince's legal department spokesperson, to explain the situation. Then, as the defendant, Zhuo Jingxi would lie according to Pizarro's instructions. Then it would be a fierce battle of words between the prosecution's legal team and the defense team led by Pizarro. The two sides talked back and forth from civil law to the patent bill. The plaintiff claimed that Zhuo Jingxi's actions had brought immeasurable losses to Prince's laboratory. It was a violation of moral and business rules, and also a violation of the law. The defendant firmly denied it and insisted that it was just a misunderstanding. The battle between the two sides was so intense that the staff in charge of the text broadcast almost couldn't type in time. If it was another defense lawyer, he would have lost in court. No matter how glib his tongue was, Prince's side had too much evidence. Fortunately, it was Pizarro. Although he gradually fell into a disadvantageous position, he did not completely lose until the court adjourned at noon. At noon, Qin Guang used his identity as an official of the Chinese Embassy and Ministry of Foreign Affairs to communicate with Zhuo Jingxi for exactly 5 minutes. I'm sorry. The first sentence the two said when they met in the reception room was Zhuo Jingxi's exceptionally guilty apology. Qin Guang shook his head and said, "What are you apologizing for?" Zhuo Jingxi was stunned and said, "Didn't I cause you trouble? I even caused you to drop the movie and come to Princeton." Qin Guang wanted to play along with Zhuo Jingxi's words and pretend that he sacrificed a lot. However, he thought that it might be a little too shameless, so he told the truth. "You might not believe me, but I arrived at Princeton yesterday afternoon. However, it was because of something else. I only found out about you at 8 o'clock this morning and rushed over." Zhuo Jingxi was stunned and said, "What?" Qin Guang said, "But the process isn't important as long as the result is acceptable. But you really don't have to apologize to me because you didn't cause me any trouble." Zhuo Jingxi was puzzled and said, "That's not trouble?" Qin Guang smiled and said, "At least it's not big trouble. I was worried about how to get in touch with Prince before, but now it's just right." "How is it good?" They didn't even want to talk to me. I wasted my effort. No, no, no. How could it be wasted? You just didn't realize it. Don't worry, I can settle Prince this afternoon. Oh. Qin Guang grinned and said, settle them like how I settled teacher Zhua. Zhua Jingxi suddenly looked embarrassed and blushed. Isn't this sacrifice too big? This time it was Qin Guang who was puzzled and said, what's so big about this sacrifice? As long as I can move them, I can earn it back. What? You want to earn it back from them? Zhua Jingxi was so scared that her face turned pale this time. Qin Guang felt that something was wrong. What are you thinking? Zhua Jingxi said shyly, didn't you say that you wanted to settle Prince like you did me? The person in charge of the laboratory, Mr. Bravo, is an old man in his 60s. As she said this, her butt on the chair unconsciously twisted from side to side, as if she was thinking of something. *CK. Qin Guang felt his heart aching, incomparably pained. Where did the once pure teacher Zhua go? How did the trust between people become like this? That's right, the settled, that teacher Zhua thought was Qin Guang forcefully imparting the 5 God-level formulas to her through a double-forced PY transaction. This was already shocking enough, but then Qin Guang added that she had to earn it back from others after suffering a loss first. Wouldn't that be? Zhua Jingxi couldn't imagine that scene at all. She just thought it was beautiful and didn't want to look at it. In the end, Qin Guang and Zhua Jingxi wasted 5 minutes in vain, and they didn't talk about anything serious. Fortunately, Qin Guang's main purpose was to comfort Zhua Jingxi and help her adjust her mood. When he saw her holding her stomach and laughing non-stop when she left, Qin Guang's goal was basically achieved. Then Qin Guang met with lawyer Pizarro. Qin Guang greatly praised Pizarro's performance in court, and he swiped his card to pay Pizarro's lawyer fees on the spot. He even paid according to the standard for winning the case, up to $800,000, 50% of the total lawyer fees for winning the case. But Pizarro couldn't be happy, because he didn't have any confidence in winning the case in the afternoon. Although he was keen on US dollars, there were rules in their industry and money was hot. Mr. Qin, I can't take so much money. It'll be difficult to turn the situation around in the afternoon. Pizarro said truthfully. Qin Guang waved his hand indifferently. It's okay, I don't expect to win the case. Pizarro asked blankly, Mr. Qin, then why are you doing this? Qin Guang turned his head and looked at him. Mr. Pizarro, based on your personal experience, is it possible for me to settle this matter in private, which is to say by paying a compensation fee? Pizarro said without hesitation, of course it's feasible. It's just that Prince might ask for an exorbitant price. After all, there's a lot of room for change in product research and development costs. Qin Guang asked him again, then, can you take the initiative to say this number in court in order to seduce Prince? After all, if we go into private negotiations, the whole process will take a lot of time and effort, and the battle line will be very long. Pizarro thought for a moment, his eyes rolling. According to the information provided by Ms. Zhua, Prince's actual research and development costs are about $10 million. In court, I can think of a way to get them to say $15 million. Qin Guang snapped his fingers. Okay, then it's decided. Pizarro's eyes widened in shock. Mr. Qin, this is $15 million. As far as I know, Ms. Zhua and you are not. Qin Guang smiled and patted Pizarro, who looked to be more than twice his age. You're a man. You have to be responsible, right? Although it's $15 million, I still have to pay. Mr. Qin, my daughter will graduate from Yale next year. I think you might need a very beautiful legal consultant. Qin Guang turned and ran. This shameless old man sold his daughter so quickly. Actually, Qin Guang was not worried at all. Right now he was like Jiang Taigong. $15 million might seem like a waste, but sooner or later he would have to spit it out. Chapter 1091. At 1:30 p.m. the court resumed. The reporters in the court were still the same as in the morning. Since they were following a piece of news, they naturally had to follow it to the end. They were still waiting to make use of this hot topic to create a huge news. Now that the popular Qin Guang was involved, it was even more explosive news. Some well-informed reporters had already found out that Pizarro was not hired by the Chinese embassy. Instead, he was hired by Qin Guang with a large sum of money. As early as noon, they had already sent out the press release, successfully occupying the hot spot, which made their peers envious and gnashed their teeth in anger. However, there were many smart people in the world. It was fine to use Pizarro as a hot topic, but the Chinese were simply walking news machines. As long as they continued to dig deeper, they would eventually find other hot topics. Therefore, at about 1 p.m., another piece of news was unearthed. Some Princeton reporters used other people's sightings of Qin Guang and Fang Tianyu driving into the courthouse's parking lot as a clue. They found out that the two came from the Eaton Manor. He then inquired about the people who lived in the building, and this was going to be fun. Many senior Oscar judges who lived in Los Angeles had secretly moved from the West Coast to the East Coast like thieves. Even many senior Oscar members from other cities in the United States had come to Princeton and lived in the Eaton Manor. Coupled with Donald Jostine's streaking a few days ago, it was not difficult to guess the motives of these big names in the film industry. They were afraid. This made the reporters unable to help but laugh. They raised their hands and wrote the most malicious article. The evil forces from the East, in the film industry, pursue the Oscar judges fiercely. Celebrities flee in panic. When this article was released, it was even more popular than the previous article about the lawsuit. After all, Qin Guang's movie was still the one that everyone was paying attention to recently. People from all walks of life in the film industry had different opinions on this, but generally speaking they felt that Qin Guang's behavior was too much. In the past, people who wanted to win an Oscar also knew how to use public relations, but Qin Guang was the first one who did it so crudely. However, people who didn't particularly care about the film industry discussed this matter with great interest. They felt that the big names in the Motion Picture Association were too embarrassing. Do you have to be so scared? Although Qin Guang is quite eccentric, the United States is a country ruled by law. No matter how crazy he is, he can't put a knife to your neck just for an award, right? Isn't your behavior a disgrace to the upper class? Besides, women is really good. Don't you think you're being too harsh on the Chinese people? Before the word-of-mouth explosion of women, the North American audience and ordinary people still felt that the Film Association's boycott of Qin Guang was upholding justice. But now, with the change of public opinion, especially with the double word-of-mouth explosion of women and World's Pie, many ordinary people really felt that Qin Guang deserved to win the Oscar. The Motion Picture Association's current actions were a little unreasonable, even losing the demeanor of a big country. Therefore, this draft, which was obviously intended to discredit Qin Guang, did not achieve the desired effect. Instead, many people openly criticized the Motion Picture Association for treating the fair and serious Oscar selection as a joke. At this time, Qin Guang, who was in the courtroom, was thinking about Zhuo Jingxi in Prince's laboratory. He didn't know that the public opinion had become like this. If he had found out about this, he might have found a way to find the reporter and thank him properly. There was no other reason. It was precisely because this draft had exposed the truth that the people from the Motion Picture Association were suddenly pushed to the teeth of the storm. The big names in the association, who had planned to run to Europe immediately, found out very awkwardly that they couldn't leave. It wasn't that someone had stopped them, but now that the matter had been exposed, if they really ran away, wouldn't it be true that they were scared to the point of peeing their pants? If they left quietly, they could barely find an excuse, but they couldn't do that now. Even if that was really the case, people live with a face, trees live with a layer of bark. Everyone here was a person of status and prestige. In the future they would have to go out and meet people. Therefore, these people quietly returned their plane tickets and took a bus back to Eaton Manor. They announced to the public that they had nothing to do with Qin Guang at all, and that they were just here for a vacation. It didn't matter if they believed it or not, they believed it. If Qin Guang knew that he had unintentionally appeared in the Princeton District Court to deal with Zhuo Jingxi's matter, and instead he had taken a big detour to put invisible shackles on the legs of the people from the Motion Picture Association and tied them to Eaton Manor, he would probably laugh his head off. In the courtroom, after another half an hour of confrontation, under Pizarro's deliberate guidance, although he gradually fell into a disadvantageous position, the thinking of the prosecution's team was slowly pulled into his train of thought. Pizarro, who was originally arguing with the other side about Zhuo Jingxi's motive, suddenly changed the topic and mentioned something else. Let me ask the plaintiff. In our opinion, even if the defendant really did take away the bottle containing the sample from the laboratory due to personal negligence. However, it was also debatable how valuable the things she had taken away were. For example, if the defendant took away a bottle containing distilled water, then can we think that the plaintiff is making a mountain out of a molehill? The prosecution lawyer was about to speak, but the head of Prince's legal department spoke first. Lawyer Pizarro, I think your question is ridiculous. If Dr. Zhuo had just taken a broom from the laboratory, of course we wouldn't have any objections. However, what she took away was the latest photocatalyst research results from our laboratory. There is no doubt about that. Pizarro smiled and teased, yes, you are all great scientists. You can completely say that a bottle of silver paint is the latest research result, and that it is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The judge slammed the table and said, "Defense lawyer, please watch your attitude and words." Pizarro nodded. "Your Honor, I have reason to believe that the plaintiff is deliberately exaggerating the value of the bottle that Dr. Zhua took away. If you want to prove its value, I think the plaintiff must come up with more evidence. Otherwise, I can assume that my client just took away some insignificant raw materials." The head of Prince's legal department was so angry that he was about to fly into a rage. The prosecution lawyer winked at him, then turned to Pizarro and said, "Then, Lawyer Pizarro, may I interpret what you said to mean that if we can prove the value of the evidence, then we can conclude that Dr. Zhua took away a valuable sample from Prince's laboratory?" Pizarro nodded. "Yes, but whether it was intentional or unintentional will still need to be judged by the judge." The prosecution lawyer grinned, then turned to the head of the legal department and nodded, feeling that he had finally led the famous lawyer Pizarro into his trap. Since they were going to sue Zhua Jingxi, how could they not have done the basic work? It seemed that all they needed to do now was produce the detailed accounts of when Prince's laboratory had funded Zhua Jingxi's experimental group, as well as the verification and appraisal of the results, and they would almost be able to convict the defendant. The head of the legal department and the prosecution lawyer looked at each other and understood each other's intentions. They had thought that Pizarro would turn this case into a protracted battle, and that it would take at least a few months of evidence collection and other wrangling before they could convict the defendant. They hadn't expected that Pizarro, the famous lawyer, would fail to live up to his reputation and reveal such an obvious loophole in the defense process, putting the defendant in a very disadvantageous position. Pizarro was so experienced that as soon as he saw the eyes of the prosecution lawyer and the plaintiff's representative meet, he could guess what they were thinking. He felt proud and disappointed at the same time. He was proud that his ability was much better than that of his peers, and that he could achieve whatever effect he wanted in court. He was also disappointed that after today's events, if his client, Qin Guang, couldn't come up with anything amazing other than compensation, his reputation in the industry would be affected. Reputation was almost equivalent to half a lawyer's rice bowl, and he had suffered a huge loss in order to get his client, Qin Guang, the $1.6 million. Not only did these people realize the change in the defense situation, but the slightly sleepy judge also felt refreshed. He had thought that this case would drag on for a long time, but he hadn't expected the dust to settle so quickly. The eyes of the reporters and spectators also lit up. The news reporters began to crazily type on the keyboard on their phones, wanting to publish the article as fast as possible before anyone else. The photo reporters began to take photos of the scene and manually mosaic them, ready to publish the news with pictures. The person in charge of Prince's legal department slowly stood up under the anticipation of the crowd. The book in his hand was the accounting records for the past half a year. Of course, there was something fishy about it. The total capital investment had been increased by about 60%. What was written in the book was the market price, but for a company as large as Prince, whether it was buying raw materials or experimental equipment, it was a proper big client, so the price was naturally lower than the market price. Since last June, Prince's laboratory's investment in Dr. Zhua's experimental group is detailed below. June 11th purchased. About 10 minutes later, the head of the legal department finally finished reading the long bill. The total investment of Prince's laboratory in Dr. Zhua's group is as high as $16.73 million. The huge courtroom suddenly burst into an uproar. Many people hadn't expected that scientific research would burn so much money. The group led by Zhua Jingxi could only be described as average within Prince, and there were at least 100 similar groups within Prince. In just 6 months they had burned through more than $16 million. The head of the legal department was particularly satisfied with the sensation his speech had caused. He even glanced in Zhua Jingxi and Qin Guang's direction with a slightly provocative expression, as if to say, "So what if you have a celebrity to protect you? Everyone, it's not over yet. Here's the verification process of our results." The following papers have been published in major journals by Dr. Zhua herself and her experimental group, as well as the project leader, Dr. Wurzman. The titles of the papers are, "Another 10 minutes passed. So, we believe that Zhua Jingxi's behavior has caused us major economic losses, and we ask the judge to make a fair ruling." After saying that, the person in charge of the legal department finally felt proud and elated, as if he had reached the top and looked down on all the heroes. Pizarro's face was full of despair. Seeing this, the prosecution lawyer was proud. "It took me less than a day to defeat Pizarro in court. This is my chance to make a name for myself." Lawyer for the defendant, what else do you have to say? With such a mood, the prosecution lawyer decisively hit Pizarro when he was down. Pizarro looked like he was struggling again. After a short moment of hesitation, he asked in a seemingly desperate manner, "May I ask the plaintiff and the prosecution's lawyer if the only reason you filed a lawsuit against my client is because the defendant's actions have caused you a total economic loss of $16.73 million US? The head of the legal department said firmly, "Of course." The prosecution lawyer also nodded. "That's right." Pizarro's expression suddenly changed again. He stopped talking and turned to look in Qin Guang's direction. The figure was higher than expected, but to Qin Guang, who had recently caused a sensation in the North American box office, it did not seem to make any difference. Under Pizarro's gaze, Qin Guang, who was sitting in the audience, slowly stood up. The judge banged his hammer again. "Those who have nothing to do with the trial, please sit down. This is a warning." Although he knew Qin Guang, he did not care who he was. The dignity of the court could not be tarnished. Qin Guang smiled. "Your Honor, I have something to do with the trial." Without waiting for the judge and the plaintiff to speak, Qin Guang suddenly said in a powerful voice, "On behalf of the defendant, Zhuo Jingxi, I am willing to promise in public that I will unconditionally compensate Prince Laboratories' economic loss of $16.73 million US. I will also bear all the costs of this lawsuit. Then the plaintiff has not suffered any losses at all, so the case is completely invalid." He raised his right hand high, and in it was a check that he had just written. Next to the check, he was holding his UBS black card between his fingers. Without a doubt, the number on this check was US $16.73 million. The moment Qin Guang said this, the courtroom was in an uproar. Crazy. This Chinese man is crazy. No, he was a crazy man before. I've seen people spend a lot of money to pick up girls, but I've never heard of anyone spending more than $16 million US in public like him in court, not to mention seeing it. You're even better than Murdoch, who gave hundreds of millions to Deng Wendy. Murdoch unwillingly lost the lawsuit and had no choice but to fork out money, but you took the initiative to spend the check without batting an eyelid. You're truly an invincible tycoon. The female reporter and the female audience held their hands in their hands. Their eyes were as bright as the sun. Please give me a dozen tycoons like this. I'm wet, I'm completely wet. In an instant, the huge courtroom was filled with flashes and the sound of cameras snapping could be heard non-stop. The judges in the courtroom were stunned. The Prince legal department and the legal team were also stunned. The other local officials and agents in Princeton were also stunned. The officials from the Ministry of Science and Technology and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs who rushed over from Washington had their mouths wide open. Even the staff from the Chinese embassy were dizzy. Damn, I counted with my fingers. Isn't that 100 million renminbi? Regardless of the relationship between Zhuo Jingxi and Qin Guang, what more could a woman ask for when she had such a husband? In order to clear your name, 100 million renminbi was thrown away just like that. Zhuo Jingxi also did not expect Qin Guang to use such a simple and crude method to clear his name. Without hesitation, 100 million renminbi. His sacrifice was indeed too big. He loved money so much and would even skid to save fuel, but for me, I wanted to repay the debt, but how am I going to repay him in this lifetime? The reporters who had already released the trial results in advance were embarrassed. Damn, I thought this guy was just here to watch the show in court. Why didn't you tell us earlier that you would use such a ruthless method? What do we do now? We'll definitely be scolded by the editor-in-chief or the readers. But what can we do? We're all so desperate. No. I object. We refuse to compensate. We demand severe punishment for the criminal. After a brief moment of confusion and shock, the head of Prince's legal department immediately reacted. Although $16 million wasn't a small amount of money, Prince didn't really care about it. What they really wanted was to make an example out of this case. On the one hand, it would deter the Chinese researchers all over America, and on the other hand, it would elevate the status of Prince's laboratory in the North American scientific community. They would rather not have the money. The plaintiff's legal team next to the head of Prince's team remained silent and did not continue with his words. Up until now, the plaintiff's legal team had finally guessed the plan of Qin Guang and the defense lawyer. That's right, they had planned to lose money from the very beginning. Especially since the beginning of the court session in the afternoon, Pizarro seemed to be constantly losing ground, but in fact, it was all a trap. All of Prince's accounting books had been laid out, and the exact number of losses had also been exposed. If the defendant was willing to pay the full amount of compensation, of course, the lawsuit would be over. In addition, the head of Prince's legal department and the defendant had publicly admitted that the only reason they had accused Zhuo Jingxi was because of the financial losses they had suffered. The so-called leaking of confidential technology and infringement of intellectual property could also be measured in terms of value, and that value was $16.73 million. This was a court, and anything said outside could be used as evidence. Words said in court could not be treated as child's play. There was no turning back. What was done was done. As expected, Pizarro immediately regained the initiative in the court. Your Honor, I think the plaintiff's objection is invalid. We have clearly stated the amount of compensation based on the financial losses suffered by the plaintiff, so the plaintiff has not suffered any damage. Furthermore, my client's mistake was purely due to his negligence. Now that we are willing to compensate, he is no longer a criminal. I think the plaintiff is suspected of infringing on my client's reputation. I reserve the right to file a lawsuit. The judge nodded. He couldn't wait for the matter to end like this. Yes, the plaintiff, please watch your words. The head of Prince's legal department looked at his client's team of lawyers. Say something. The plaintiff's lawyer stood up helplessly and said in a low voice, Sir, if the defendant is willing to pay the full amount of compensation, then our claim is no longer valid. This case has been closed. As the prosecution's lawyer, he was actually happy to see this result. The reason was simple. As the client's lawyer, if Prince successfully obtained more than $16 million in compensation, his law firm would, of course, get a commission according to the contract. No matter what, he had helped Prince win the lawsuit and received a sizable amount of compensation. Not only would his law firm's reputation in the industry not suffer any damage, but it would also rise by a notch. About 15 minutes later, this lawsuit, which people thought would last at least a few months, came to a dramatic end when Qin Guang completed the check transfer procedure in court. The face of the Prince's legal department was ashen. It was worse than eating a fly. The mission he had received was to send Zhuo Jingxi to prison, but now she was acquitted. Who would want more than $10 million? Prince spent as much as $1 billion on research and development every year. A group of people walked out of the gate of the district court under the flashing lights of countless reporters and onlookers. The head of Prince's legal department glared fiercely in Zhuo Jingxi's direction. Dr. Zhuo, don't think that this matter is over. Even if you can escape the punishment of the law, you still can't escape the boycott of the global scientific community. Your unethical behavior will make you despised by the entire scientific community. You know how shameful your behavior is? Zhuo Jingxi felt a little guilty. When she took the things from the laboratory, she only thought of Qin Guang, and she had no intention of returning to the United States. Now that she was being criticized in public, she felt humiliated, but she couldn't refute it. Qin Guang looked back at him. Watch your words. I don't mind beating you up and then we go back to court. I can compensate you for your medical expenses. The face of the head of Prince's legal department changed drastically. Even Pizarro, who was originally next to Qin Guang, quietly moved to the side. Recently, Qin Guang's reputation in North America had been too resounding. Apart from being a movie actor, his other identities were already known to everyone. Who would want to take a punch from the world's arm wrestling champion? Not caring about his reputation, the big boss of the legal department turned around and walked away quickly, cursing in a low voice, a barbarian who only knows how to solve problems with violence. Qin Guang looked at his back and shouted, Sir, as you said just now, of course this matter is not over. We will meet again this afternoon at the latest. The head of the legal department turned around and looked at Qin Guang. Dream on. I don't want to see you guys again. Qin Guang smiled and ignored him. On the other side, Pizarro spoke again. Mr. Qin, if there's nothing else, I'll be leaving first. We had a good time working together this time, but since we lost the lawsuit, you don't have to pay the remaining 800,000 yuan. However, Qin Guang shook his head. Mr. Pizarro, wait a minute. We still have a large intellectual property contract with Prince. I think I still need your legal assistance. Of course, I will pay you the remaining 800,000 yuan. Just treat it as a follow-up legal consultation fee. Chapter 1092. Pizarro was taken aback. Mr. Qin, what do you mean? Turning to look at Zhuo Jingxi, Qin Guang smiled and continued. If Prince still wants to continue being a photo catalyst, they will have to return the $73 million that they took from me to me. Furthermore, I'm afraid that they will have to bleed a lot. Pizarro was confused. Mr. Qin, where does your confidence come from? Qin Guang looked back at Zhuo Jingxi. indicating that it was time for her to appear. Zhuo Jingxi was a little embarrassed. She knew that Chen Guang wanted to push her to the front, but since she was already in Princeton, it was indeed her duty to communicate with outsiders about the photocatalyst industry. Actually, I didn't have to come back, but I bit the bullet and came back because I had something that could definitely convince Prince's higher-ups. I just didn't expect Prince to be so arrogant. They didn't want to talk to me at all and just wanted to send me to prison. Zhuo Jingxi said. Pizarro was even more confused. Ms. Zhuo, if it's convenient for you to tell me, what do you think you're relying on to convince Prince's laboratory? Zhuo Jingxi blushed slightly as she looked at Chen Guang. It's 5 types of photocatalyst technology that transcend time. It's at least 50 years ahead of Prince's current level. Even if Prince only learns a little bit from this set of ideas, it will allow them to leave other scientific research institutions in the world in the same field far behind in 5 years. But if we can't reach an agreement with Prince in the end, and we turn to other institutions and succeed, after 5 years, Prince's laboratory will no longer be involved in the field of photocatalysis. That's impossible. Pizarro exclaimed. That's ridiculous. On the way here, I also learned about the current situation in the industry. Prince is fully deserving of being one of the leaders. There's no way you can get technology that's 50 years ahead of them. It's unrealistic. Zhuo Jingxi looked at Chen Guang again, her eyes full of infatuation. She thought to herself that Pizarro's reaction was exactly the same as when she first heard about this from Chen Guang. According to common sense, yes, but Mr. Pizarro, don't you think it's ridiculous for Chen Guang to win an Oscar in his first movie? Pizarro didn't quite understand why Zhuo Jingxi would suddenly bring up Chen Guang's attempt at an Oscar. He only nodded and said, "It's indeed ridiculous. But now, isn't his chance of success very high? It is indeed very big." Then, Mr. Pizarro, the 5 new photocatalyst formulas are actually Chen Guang's achievements. Since he is involved in this incident, does it mean that the seemingly impossible and incomprehensible thing is actually very logical? Pizarro was stunned for about 30 seconds before he nodded helplessly. You're right, Ms. Zhuo. At this time it was Chen Guang's turn to speak. So, let's rest for half an hour first, then go directly to Prince's laboratory and ask to see the person in charge. I want this matter to be completely settled by today. Pizarro nodded helplessly. Well, if Mr. Chen has the confidence and determination, let's continue. Chen Guang nodded. Of course. Anyway, I'm sorry to trouble you this time, Mr. Pizarro. If it ends like this, your reputation in the industry will indeed be affected. But if we can reach an agreement with Prince and completely dominate the negotiations, not only will it solve some of my current urgent problems, but it will also make people understand the real reason why we made concessions in court. Pizarro had no choice but to believe it this time. Yes, I hope we can succeed. In fact, he wanted to see what Chen Guang and Zhuo Jingxi's so-called scientific research results looked like. But he considered that if they were really that good, even if they wrote it down, he might not be able to understand it. So he didn't mention it again. At this time, the media inevitably reported about this lawsuit again, causing a sensation. This was originally just an academic dispute in the field of science, but Chen Guang's involvement and single-handedly turned the lawsuit into an entertaining farce in court. It suddenly dyed the serious court hearing with a different color. It was a serious lawsuit, but also a dramatic entertainment event. There was even a Chinese tycoon spending a lot of money for a woman, which was naturally eye-catching. Other than that, coupled with the relationship between Chen Guang and Pizarro, the farce between Chen Guang and the senior member of the Motion Picture Association hiding in Eaton Manor, and the big blunder made by the media before the trial ended, Chen Guang's reputation in the United States skyrocketed in one day. Now, the people who followed him had completely surpassed the categories of movie lovers, fighting fans, racing fans, esports fans, language enthusiasts, flight enthusiasts, and so on. Even young scholars who didn't pay attention to the outside world were dragged into this mess. Chen Guang's incomparably domineering way of picking up girls made the blood of countless women boil. Such a man was like a Prince Charming riding a white horse and descending from the sky on a colorful cloud. What he did for the female thief was just like what happened in Andersen's fairy tale. It made people's curiosity about him rise to an unparalleled level in a short period of time. This invisible influence even made the box office of women rise again against the law of the market, but this was all for later. About an hour later, the team of Chen Guang, Zhuo Jingxi, and Pizarro sat in the conference room arranged by Dr. Bravo. Auntie May from the Flower sect and 3 military personnel did not follow them in, but stayed outside the conference room as bodyguards. As the chief director of Prince's laboratory, Although Dr. Bravo did not specialize in photocatalysis, he had a very wide range of interests. He had made great achievements in physics, chemistry, mathematics, and other fields. He was one of the top masters in the world who could control the overall situation. Although he did not win the Nobel Prize, his influence in the European and American academic circles was far greater than that of ordinary Nobel Prize winners. He could be called a big name among big names and an academic tycoon in all fields. He originally did not intend to take time out of his busy schedule to meet Qin Guang and the others, but later he was shocked by the words brought by Qin Guang and Pizarro. "If you don't meet me today, you will regret it for the rest of your life." He understood what Qin Guang meant. This was a F***king threat. Mr. Bravo felt that he was old. Although he was respected in the academic world, his status was not much different from Donald Johnston's in the film industry. Bravo also knew about Donald's experience and could not help but feel sad. On the other hand, Qin Guang also got 2 Nobel Prize winners in medicine through Tang Ying, as well as the dean of the Moorlands Medical College to call and explain the situation. The Prince Laboratories' research proportion in the medical field was not low, and they had a lot of dealings with Nobel Prize winners in medicine and Dean Moorlands. Europe and the United States were actually the same as China. After all, it was a social society. If you don't give face to the monk, give face to the Buddha. If you give me a way out today, we'll meet again in the future. Since the other party had already brought up the face of the Nobel Prize winners, they had to have a chat. Moreover, since the plan to send Zhuo Jingxi to prison had been completely ruined, although Bravo was slightly unhappy, he was still a scholar. He would not spend too much effort on these things. Although more than $16 million was not much in Bravo's eyes, it was not so little that it could be ignored. In short, the conflict between him and the Chinese researcher Zhuo Jingxi was over. In addition, Bravo also had to admit that he was very interested in what Qin Guang and Zhuo Jingxi said about their crazy confidence. "If I don't see you, you want me to run naked too? Alright, since that's the case, I'll meet you guys." 15 minutes later, Bravo and Wurzman walked in with 17 or 18 young people behind them. Wurzman was the head of the photocatalyst project team in the entire Prince Laboratory. The other dozen or so people had the same identity as Zhuo Jingxi. Each of them led 1 to 2 to 3 experimental groups. They were all chief researchers, and they were not limited to the field of photocatalysis. When selecting people, Bravo's criteria did not seem to be academic level, but whether they were strong or not. The people who came in were all men, and they did not look like scientific researchers. They were all very strong, and they all looked like retired NFL athletes. They did not want to be knowledgeable, they just wanted to be able to fight. "Dr. Zhuo, your behavior has made us very sad. In the beginning, we agreed to let you into our laboratory because of the recommendation of your mentor, the highly respected Professor Wen. We also have unreserved trust in you, but what you have done has caused great harm to Prince. Don't you feel a little guilty?" When everyone sat down, especially the dozen or so fat laboratory directors sitting in the conference room, Bravo finally spoke. Thinking that there was strength in numbers, Bravo wanted to cut the Gordian knot, so he was not very polite. Zhuo Jingxi's face was slightly red. Facing an old scholar like Dr. Bravo, she was indeed very ashamed. Although she had Qin Guang's support, Zhuo Jingxi knew that what she did was not good enough. Qin Guang was thick-skinned. "Anyway, I didn't get any benefits from Prince's results. Now, I have returned it to you and I have no intention of stealing your results. I have lost my money and I don't want your things." In a sense, according to the agreement in court, after Qin Guang paid $16.73 million, Zhuo Jingxi's research results in Prince belonged to Qin Guang. Bravo's words were pure bullshit. "Dr. Bravo, the matter with teacher Zhuo is in the past. I don't think she accidentally took something away and caused any real harm to Prince. Now, your technology has not been leaked, and I have already paid a considerable amount of compensation." Dr. Wurzman, who was next to him, interrupted, "Mr. Chen, don't joke. Do you think I don't know you Chinese? You are the best at stealing, the best at taking other people's things for free and turning them into your own. Your planes, tanks and many other things were stolen from us for free. Prince's photocatalyst research results are the world's best. Do you dare say that you are not tempted? Isn't this what you Chinese love to do?" If Bravo was just being rude, Wurzman was purely provoking trouble and suspected of racial discrimination. Previously, when Zhuo Jingxi was promoted to a director, Wurzman had clearly opposed it. Later, because of Bravo's insistence and Zhuo Jingxi's extraordinary talent and work, Wurzman finally gave in. However, this still did not change his prejudice against the Chinese. Wurzman represented the mainstream of the European and American science and technology world. They felt that although the Chinese were useful, they were too unstable. They could be used as coolies, but they should never be entrusted with important tasks. No matter how good Zhuo Jingxi's temper was, she could not help but feel angry when she heard Wurtzman's attitude. But before she could flip out, Qin Guang slammed the table and stood up. Dr. Wurtzman, who gave you face? Do you think I will be interested in your garbage results? Don't be ridiculous. This is a treasure in your eyes, but in my eyes, it's not even qualified to be thrown into the garbage dump, okay? While he was scolding them, he suddenly realized that he was talking about Teacher Zhuo's own research results. This was a slap in the face to his own people, and it was slightly embarrassing. He turned his head to look at Zhuo Jingxi, and sure enough, he saw that her head was almost buried under the table. It was indeed embarrassing. They had worked hard for 10 years to accumulate knowledge, and finally produced results in the world's leading Prince laboratory, but it was far inferior to what Qin Guang had produced after learning on his own for half a year with zero foundation. It could even be said to be the difference between the light of a firefly and the brilliance of the sun and the moon. How embarrassing. On the other end, Qin Guang changed his words again. Okay, I admit that your results are indeed world-leading in the current era. But you want to say that I will covet your things? That's too ridiculous. The photocatalyst results in my hands can be compared to yours for half a century, okay? Would people nowadays steal diode semiconductor technology from 50 years ago? Is that realistic? In my eyes, you are no different from babies who have just learned to speak, okay? Looking down on the Chinese? Who do you think you are? You don't even deserve to carry my shoes. Wurtzman glared. Ridiculous. Bravo was also furious. This is ridiculous. Qin Guang questioned their academic standards and even mocked them as children. Such crazy nonsense made them even angrier than stealing their experimental results. Next to them, Pizarro's mouth twitched. This was the first time he had worked with Qin Guang. Although he had long known that Qin Guang's attempt to get his hands on the Oscars had angered the North American film industry, Pizarro had thought that the people in the film industry had overreacted. But now that he had personally experienced the way Qin Guang communicated with people, Pizarro felt that it was a miracle that Qin Guang had survived until now without being beaten to death. No wonder the people from the Film Association avoided him like a demon. Even the most cultured person could be angered to death by him. Zhuo Jingxi blushed, but she understood that this was Qin Guang's negotiation technique. First, he pretended to provoke the other party's anger and curiosity. This way he could skip all the details and get straight to the point and take out his 5 godlike photocatalyst formulas. Zhuo Jingxi gave Qin Guang's negotiation technique a very unique name, face-slapping negotiation. On the other side, Bravo and Wurtzman were almost going crazy. The other 10 or so researchers were on standby, feeling that a fight could break out at any time. A few of the more hot-tempered ones even jumped up and pointed at Qin Guang's nose, wanting to beat him up. I've never seen such an unreasonable Chinese person like you. Do you know who you're talking to? You're humiliating knowledge. You illiterate. You don't understand anything at all. Shameful nouveau riche, your entire body reeks of the stench of money. Foolish and ignorant. Your laughable amount of money isn't even worthy of carrying our prince's shoes. However, no one expected that Qin Guang would suddenly calm down after acting cool. Despite everyone's criticism, he still looked at everyone with a sneer. Meeting you guys is a waste of our precious time. Wurtzman, let's go. Bravo didn't want the two sides to have a physical conflict. Even if he had a lot of people on his side, even if there were a lot of security guards outside and even the Princeton police officers, even if an ordinary researcher was injured by Qin Guang, it wouldn't be worth it. Bravo didn't know that the security guards and police officers he relied on were being stared at by Auntie May from the Flower sect. They didn't dare to move. After that, Bravo got up and walked out of the conference room. The angry Wurtzman followed closely. When Qin Guang saw this scene, he unhurriedly said, "Do the two of you not want to see what I'm relying on to be so arrogant? If you're really like what you say, people of learning, then you should at least take a look at my things before ruthlessly mocking me. Right now, you're like deserters running away." Wurtzman turned around and said, "I don't think you have anything that can move us. There's no need to waste time." Qin Guang grinned and said, "What are you afraid of?" "I have nothing to be afraid of." Qin Guang said, "Then sit back down, I'll show you what a real photocatalyst is. It doesn't matter if you leave now, I'll just publish it in the newspaper tomorrow. Do you really want the most cutting-edge technology in the field of photocatalysis to be presented in front of you in this way?" Bravo and Wurtzman looked at each other and finally chose to sit back down. "We don't believe you at all, but we don't mind seeing what tricks you have up your sleeves." Qin Guang turned to look at Zhuo Jingxi and said, "Teacher Zhuo, Please choose a formula and write the molecular formula on the blackboard over there. Zhuo Jingxi nodded and immediately stood up and went straight to the blackboard under everyone's gaze. She couldn't help but feel a little excited. Although this was not her own result, it was a great honor to be able to make Qin Guang's results come out of nowhere. Just as Zhuo Jingxi had thought before, if Qin Guang took out the 5 God-level formulas in front of her, it was the official opening of a new page in the field of photocatalysis. Now, writing this formula in front of the 2 people in charge of Prince's laboratory was equivalent to opening the door to a new era. Each of these 5 God-level formulas could be called a Nobel Prize-level achievement. As for Qin Guang's own contribution, it was as great as Newton's and Einstein's. Tremble, mortals, you will completely surrender to his greatness. You will crawl under him and tremble. Even if you are Bravo or Wurtzman, it will be useless just like me. Cough, 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 it's not the same, it's still a little different. Zhuo Jingxi's hand that was writing on the blackboard trembled slightly. She remembered some of the scenes when she really integrated the 5 God-level formulas and her hand slipped out of embarrassment. She and Qin Guang were not worried about the results being leaked. If Prince was allowed to develop the 5 God-level formulas from scratch, it would take 50 years. Even if they were given the molecular formula now, it would take at least 20 years for them to deduce the synthesis method and process from the results to finally come up with a mature technology. Even if they did not cooperate with Prince and relied solely on Qin Guang's and her own strength, her products would have long monopolized the world by then. The conference room was silent. At first, Bravo and Wurtzman looked at Zhuo Jingxi as if she was a joke. 5 minutes later, their playful smiles gradually disappeared. 10 minutes later, their eyebrows were tightly furrowed. 20 minutes later, when Zhuo Jingxi wrote the last letter, Bravo and Wurtzman pushed their glasses fiercely. Their expressions were so solemn that it was as if they saw the ancestor of modern scientific research, Sir Newton, in their dreams. After all, the 2 were the world's top scientists, the existence at the top of the scientific research pyramid. They were the head of Prince and the head of the photocatalyst project. The level of the 2 had almost reached the current human limit. Although they could not determine how the molecular formula was synthesized, nor could they determine its effect, there was no doubt that this was a kind of chemical structure that could exist in theory and was very stable. This was a new substance that had not been discovered yet, but it could indeed be synthesized in theory. The 2 did not say a word and turned their heads at the same time to look at Qin Guang. Now, the 2 of them finally realized that perhaps this young man called Right Qin wasn't joking? Chapter 1093. Zhuo Jingxi took a deep breath and looked back at Bravo and Wurtzman. These 2 academic giants who she had once looked up to, were now showing such childlike expressions. She could not help but feel proud. What the hell did you write? Do you think you can fool people with a random molecular formula? That's right, it's natural for a thief to fake it. Bravo and Wurtzman could see the stability of the molecular structure, but the other researchers in the conference room did not have this level of skill and immediately questioned it. Wuxia. One of them was about to open fire again but was stopped by Bravo. Shut up. This person was suddenly startled by the big boss's roar and did not know what was going on. Wurtzman was calmer than Bravo. After all, he did not believe in the Wuxia people. He took a deep breath and looked at Zhuo Jingxi suspiciously, then looked at Qin Guang. I admit that your chemical formula is very special, but how can you tell me that this is photocatalysis and the future of photocatalysis? Your chemical formula is so huge that it is completely different from what we understand of photocatalysis at this stage. Zhuo Jingxi first looked at Qin Guang and Qin Guang nodded at her. Teacher Zhuo, explain the specific catalytic reaction process of our formula to this group of frogs at the bottom of the well. Also, be sure to emphasize the reaction conditions and physical and chemical characteristics. Normal temperature, sunlight exposure, ultra-low loss rate, ultra-low synthesis cost, ultra-stable physical and chemical properties. With Zhuo Jingxi's previous knowledge, it was impossible for her to explain the details to others. She herself was specious, but through Qin Guang's forced PY trade, her understanding of the 5 major formulas was now no less than Qin Guang's. Okay. After Zhuo Jingxi nodded, she turned her head and looked around, her face filled with pride. Everyone, what I'm going to say next may be a bit profound, but I'll try to explain it in simple terms. I can't guarantee that others will understand, but Mr. Wurtzman and Mr. Bravo will definitely understand. If Zhuo Jingxi had said such big talk before, the Prince members in the conference room would have mocked her. They would say, although you are very talented, what qualifications do you have to talk to Dr. Bravo and Dr. Bravo like that? But now, even though they felt extremely uncomfortable in the end, no one dared to say anything. After a full 3 hours, the conference room in the central building of the Prinz Park was dead silent. All the members of Prinz were deep in thought. Bravo and Wurtzman in particular, took out a pen and paper and started scribbling away. Both of them had called their assistants to follow behind them with their laptops, ready to provide support at any time. In these 3 hours, Zhuo Jingxi explained to them the complete reaction process of this God-level formula for catalyzing broken organic macromolecular chains from the electronic and bond energy levels. Zhuo Jingxi's explanation went from the specific details of the catalytic reaction to the principle of the conversion of energy from the spectral absorption of sunlight by the catalyst. It was still the same idea that Qin Guang had told her. Deducing the process from the result, even if the entire reaction process did not really happen, it was theoretically flawless. What Zhuo Jingxi said, in particular, made Wurtzman suddenly understand many concepts that he had only thought about in the past. He could only exclaim in disbelief that this was the truth of the world. After a long time, Bravo and Wurtzman whispered to each other for a long time, and finally looked at Zhuo Jingxi in disbelief. Bravo was still more simple-minded. Dr. Zhuo, if the formula you wrote really exists and can really be manufactured, then I admit that your research results have surpassed us by a lot. Because the reaction conditions and the physical and chemical characteristics of the finished product are indeed far ahead of our current results. Wurtzman was unconvinced. He opened his mouth, but in the end he did not say anything. Zhuo Jingxi looked at the expressions of the two and knew that they were convinced. Qin Guang said, "So now, do you still think we will covet your things?" Wurtzman said, "But right now your things only exist in theory. Who knows if they can really be synthesized? Although the final product is stable, what about the intermediate products? What if the stability conditions of the intermediate products are very harsh, and the existence time is as short as a few milliseconds? What if it is impossible to synthesize with the current scientific research conditions? Also, although your theoretical verification process seems to be flawless, there is still a long way to go before a new product can be verified. Even if it can really be manufactured without actual verification, it is impossible to determine whether it is completely consistent with the theory. So, this thing you came up with is meaningless." Zhuo Jingxi was not angry. She said indifferently, "With the conditions of the photocatalyst laboratory of Gokyo University, it is indeed impossible to synthesize this new photocatalyst compound. But with the current conditions of the Prinz laboratory, we only need to add a small amount of experimental equipment and raw materials to successfully transform it into a real product. In addition, we now have a total of 5 similar formulas, all of which can be synthesized. There is no doubt about this." She paused for a second and said, "This is the real reason I returned to Princeton. Dr. Wurtzman, if you still have doubts about this, it doesn't matter. When I make the finished product, everything will come to light. Otherwise, why would I come back to court like an idiot?" Bravo's eyes lit up. He said, "You mean you want to borrow Prince's experimental conditions to complete the transformation?" Zhuo Jingxi nodded and said, "Yes, I originally wanted to talk to you, but your arrogance and rudeness surprised me." Standing to the side, Qin Guang interjected, "That's what we've been hoping for, but I feel that we should re-evaluate the feasibility of this matter." Wurtzman's eyes lit up. He said, "Okay, I apologize to you on behalf of Prince. We will not pursue the previous matters. From now on, let's talk about cooperation. We can indeed provide equipment and personnel support for the transformation of your results." Bravo nodded and said, "Yes, this matter can be completed in the shortest time with Prince's technical support." Wurtzman continued, "Regarding this kind of external cooperation project, Dr. Zhuo, you should know that we have a very complete constitution in the past. Prince wants half of the intellectual property rights." Wurtzman wasn't bluffing. The more advanced a leader was, the more dominant they would be when working with others. With Prince's current resources, others would only be able to produce results if they worked with them. Others had no choice but to give up their power for free. Zhuo Jingxi didn't say anything. She turned her head and looked at Qin Guang next to her. On the other side, Qin Guang burst into laughter and said, "The two of you are probably mistaken about something. I just said I don't have to choose you. In fact, I don't even want to choose you anymore." "Then why did you come here this afternoon?" Bravo didn't believe it. Qin Guang shrugged and said, "Why do we? To let you feel what it's like to see but not get, that's all. Your people offended me in court before and made me unhappy. I'm a very narrow-minded person, so I came here to disgust you." When he said this, Qin Guang looked at Bravo and Qin Guang with a rather evil look. Chen Guang didn't feel anything when the two of them tried to share intellectual property rights with him. In fact, he wanted to laugh. Wurtzman's face changed and he almost slammed the table. Chen Guang looked at him very calmly and said, "Do you think I only have these 5 formulas? Have all of you gone stupid from studying so much? Haven't you ever thought about where my things come from? My research and development ability has completely crushed you for 50 years. The 5 formulas that are on the table now are just the results of the first stage. I've come to you today for another reason. Since you've helped train teacher Zhua, I'm officially informing you, Prince, that you'd better stop your research in the field of photocatalysts from now on, because in 2 years at the latest, there will be no place for you in this field." Of course, Chen Guang wasn't bragging. This was the norm in the field of scientific research. When a scientific research institution in a certain field made a breakthrough and formed a crushing lead over other competitors in the field, it often meant that almost half of the competitor's investment over the years would be wasted. This was the cruelty of scientific research competition. If he won, he would win a market that was worth billions of dollars, but if he lost, he would have to sacrifice a lot of people to achieve success. The winner takes all and the loser struggles to survive. Bravo narrowed his eyes and looked at the arrogant Chen Guang. He found that he couldn't refute Chen Guang. Bravo suppressed his emotions and said, "What do you mean? If your purpose this afternoon was just to humiliate us, then you achieved your goal, but you're just wasting your precious life." Chen Guang said, "Dr. Bravo, you think it's a waste of life, but I enjoy it myself. At first, we were very sincere in talking to Prince, but think about how you responded to us. Also, do you think we're country bumpkins? I don't need your personnel assistance at all. At most, I just need to use your instruments. As for the raw materials, I can also buy them. What right do you have to try and get my intellectual property?" Prince Laboratory is indeed the world leader in the field of photocatalysis, but as far as I know, Cambridge University, Waseda University, Rockefeller Laboratory, and even MIT's Lincoln Laboratory have similar standards and experimental conditions. I can turn to them and seek cooperation now. I only need the instruments and raw materials. Although these are scarce resources, they are not monopolized. The research and development ability I have is the real monopoly of resources. You haven't corrected your position, and you have no right to bargain with me." Wuxia said angrily, "Stop dreaming. Large scientific research institutions around the world are like us. We can't contribute to you for free, we don't lack money." Chapter 1094. Chen Guang smiled. "You don't lack money, but you lack technology and ability. What if I promised others that I would provide them with technical support and complete solutions when they encountered research and development problems in the field of photocatalysts through this cooperation? Dr. Wuxia, do you think they won't be tempted?" The people in Prince's laboratory were silent. They understood the current situation, and so did the heads of other laboratories. Chen Guang continued, "Other than that, I'm not in a hurry to complete the transformation of the results. I can spend a few years to slowly build my own laboratory. I don't need to cooperate with you at all. I will kill every last one of you." After a long silence, Bravo asked all the other researchers to leave the laboratory, leaving only himself and Wuxia. He finally humbled himself and put on the right attitude that Chen Guang needed. "Mr. Chen, tell me, what are your conditions?" Chen Guang turned to look at Pizarro. It was time for Pizarro to make his entrance. He stood up and took out a contract. He pushed it forward and placed it in front of Bravo and Wuxia. "This is the clause that my client, Mr. Chen, asked me to draft. Please take a look." About 20 minutes later, Bravo and Wuxia finished reading some of the key parts of the contract. The two looked at each other. Although it was just as Chen Guang said, Prince was the weaker party, the terms that Chen Guang proposed were too much. It was like the 8-nation coalition breaking into the old summer palace with guns and cannons. Wuxia glared at him. "Why don't you just rob us?" Chen Guang squinted his eyes and smiled. "I am indeed robbing you. So, are you willing to let me rob you?" In this contract, Chen Guang requested that he use all of Prince's experimental conditions for free for the next few months, including the supply of raw materials. In addition, the entire process of forwarding the results would be kept secret from Prince. Only Chinese personnel designated by Chen Guang and Zhuo Jingxi would be allowed to participate. Even if the entire research and development process took place in Prince's industrial park, it was obvious that Wuxia and Bravo wouldn't be able to benefit from it. In addition, Chen Guang also promised to provide technical support for Prince's subsequent research and development in the field of photocatalysts. This was the only thing that attracted them. But of course this was not free of charge. Just like how they asked Qin Guang to try to split the intellectual property equally, Qin Guang also requested that as long as he and his staff participated in the research and development of intellectual property, Prince Laboratory would also be given half of the ownership. In addition, Qin Guang also asked Pizarro to list the signing fee for both parties at the end of the contract. Of course it was Prince who paid him. It was exactly $18.33 million. It was exactly the same amount of money that Qin Guang paid in the Princeton District Court in the morning. This was clearly robbery. That was why Wurzman said that. In his heart, Bravo knew that if what Qin Guang and Zhuo Jingxi had revealed was real, then there wouldn't be any room for negotiation. They simply couldn't afford the situation that Qin Guang had described before. So far, Prince had invested billions of USD in research and development in the field of photocatalysts. Although there were some results, they were still burning money. The reason that the laboratory could continue to attract investors was because of the broad prospects of the market. Prince itself was completely leading in the industry, so the future returns could be expected. But once Qin Guang and his technology produced a product that represented the next era, it would be a devastating blow to Prince's entire photocatalyst research and development. It would cause their billions of USD investment to go down the drain. This would cause a huge blow to the entire laboratory. Not only would it damage their reputation, but it would also cause investors to lose confidence. This kind of loss was unbearable. Even in his dreams, he wished that he was dreaming, but the molecular formula that was still written on the blackboard was still so obvious. He had checked his own calculations and found that he and Wurzman couldn't refute the complete theoretical system that Zhuo Jingxi had presented. As a top researcher in the world, his intuition told him that all of this was indeed true. But Bravo still wanted to negotiate and said, "Your conditions are too harsh, we can't accept them." "Okay then, goodbye." All of a sudden, Qin Guang stood up and waved his hand at Zhuo Jingxi and Pizarro. "Let's go." After that, he didn't wait for the others to say anything and walked straight to the door. Qin Guang's actions were so sudden that even his own people didn't understand. "Aren't we about to enter the rhythm of negotiations? What are you doing?" But Zhuo Jingxi and Pizarro didn't question any of his decisions. After a short moment of shock, they followed suit. Bravo and Wurzman were stunned as they watched the three people quickly disappear from the conference room. The two chased out of the conference room and Wurzman shouted, "Mr. Qin, wait a minute." Qin Guang waved his hand without looking back. "I won't wait. Goodbye, good luck." After that, Qin Guang nodded at Auntie May. Auntie May, who had a cold expression on her face, turned sideways and appeared directly behind him, blocking Bravo and Pizarro's path. 10 minutes later, when they drove out of the Prince's Park, Zhuo Jingxi couldn't help but ask, "What are we doing?" Qin Guang chuckled. "Don't worry, the news of us coming to Prince's this afternoon will definitely spread. Tomorrow we'll publish the molecular formula you wrote in the conference room in the newspaper. By then, people from other research institutions will hear about it. Dr. Bravo must be regretting it now, right? We don't need to negotiate with them at all. We have the absolute advantage. The conditions I give are the final conditions. I don't want to waste my breath on negotiations." Qin Guang replied without any hesitation. Zhuo Jingxi remembered the molecular formula. "Ah, we forgot to erase it when we left." Qin Guang waved his hand. "It doesn't matter. I deliberately left it to tempt them. Even if they copy it, they won't be able to synthesize it." Zhuo Jingxi was still a little worried. "But actually, the other research institutions are slightly weaker than Prince's. They won't be able to produce a finished product within 3 months. Qin Guang nodded. "I know that, but Prince's doesn't know about our urgency. First, we need to attract our competitors. This is our bargaining chip. Besides, I don't intend to keep these things to myself. Other than Wuxia University, I'm willing to share them with all the other research institutions as long as they are willing to learn." Pizarro was puzzled. "What? This isn't in line with your interests, sir." Qin Guang's expression suddenly became exceptionally solemn. "Photocatalysis is always something that benefits mankind. Since I have this ability and I'm not short of money, of course there's no need to hide it. As long as I can popularize this new technology as quickly as possible, I can better treat the world's sewage and protect our planet. This is my ultimate goal." Pizarro was speechless. "Mr. Qin, you're completely different from the rumors. You're really great beyond my imagination." Qin Guang smiled as he replied, "I'm not that great. In any case, I'm only providing technical solutions to others, and they will never be able to catch up to me. They will forever be eating my dust. I'm just trying to make the cake bigger." "Then why did you reject Wuxia University?" "There's no special reason. I just don't like them. Pizarro was speechless. He felt that Qin Guang was really an exceptionally complicated person. On the other end, Qin Guang had already instructed Zhuo Jingxi. When the people from the other research institutions come, spread the word about our intention to purchase equipment. Let everyone know that we also want to build our own photocatalysis laboratory. If the Chinese Academy of Sciences is interested, we can cooperate with them in depth. But I'll have to rely on you for these things in the future. I might not have time for 2 years. Zhuo Jingxi didn't quite understand why Qin Guang cared so much about 2 years, but she wouldn't question him. She had found a more reliable excuse for Qin Guang. It was obviously that he was lazy. Chapter 1095. Qin Guang decisively took Zhuo Jingxi back to the hotel and continued to be a hands-off boss. He did not pay much attention to the box office. Now that the trend was set and could not be stopped, Qin Guang only needed to focus on dealing with the Oscar judges hiding in Eaton Manor. As for the photocatalyst, Zhuo Jingxi actually knew more about it than he did and knew how to set up a laboratory. It was certainly not a simple matter. It involved purchasing equipment, buying land, building a house, hiring researchers, purchasing experimental materials, and so on. Every single one of them required a large amount of expenditure, time, energy, and manpower. But in other words, as long as there was money, it did not seem to be difficult. As long as there was money, there would always be brave people who could help you solve your problems. What Qin Guang could provide for Zhuo Jingxi now was an almost unlimited supply of funds. It seemed that the pressure of $300 million was still too much, but it did not matter. It was not like he had to spend it all at once. There was still a long time, so he could take it slow. He could make some money from other places and burn it later. Speaking of which, if Sister Tang Ying wanted to form a medical research institute with Gokyo University and Morelands Medical College, as the most important sample of the institute, it seemed that he should also be involved. Otherwise, wouldn't it be disgusting to let others play with the old man's genes all day long, and the old man did not even know what was going on? This thought came to Qin Guang's mind again. He had originally planned to leave Zhuo Jingxi in the hotel, but he hadn't expected that she would not be idle for even a moment. Accompanied by Auntie Mei, Fang Tianyu and Tang Xiaokai's entourage, she had gone out to arrange for the molecular formula to be published in magazines and newspapers. In addition, she also needed to use this matter to send out the recruitment requirements. At this time, Zhuo Jingxi was full of energy after receiving Qin Guang's knowledge. Especially after Prince returned from the negotiations, Zhuo Jingxi had an inexplicable sense of historical mission in her heart. Although Qin Guang was amazing and unprecedented, his flaw was equally obvious, and that was laziness. Let him turn his knowledge of photocatalysis into a real product. He had too much power and no desire in his heart. Although he said that his goal was so noble that it could even make Zhuo Jingxi's blood boil, looking at what this guy did all day, he just had to be addicted to acting in movies and countless other strange things, unable to extricate himself. This was a guy who didn't mean what he said. Therefore, this matter could only fall on his head. Zhuo Jingxi felt that as someone close to Qin Guang, she was doing the photocatalyst thing. In a sense, she was the one who led Qin Guang into the field. Then she had the responsibility and obligation to squeeze the energy out of his brain and let him use his wisdom to make more contributions to this era. This was not the opposite of his original dream, and in a sense, it was the opposite of it. She would drag him forward in the field of photocatalysis, come up with more results that could change the world, and return the great rivers and mountains to a lush green. Let me be his shadow. I don't want any fame, and he is too much better than me. Instead of doing twice the work for half the result, it is better to let myself be his catalyst and let him play the greatest role. Only by doing this can I make my life more meaningful. As a person who from the beginning had made up her mind to dedicate her youth and the rest of her life to knowledge, this was probably the deepest obsession in Zhuo Jingxi's heart. It was slightly childish, but it was very noble and great. Therefore, she decisively refused Qin Guang's request to roll in the sheets. With this guy's combat power, if she were to sleep with him, she would not be able to get out of bed in 2 or 3 days. If Qin Guang knew that he had accidentally cultivated another Frankenstein, he would probably find a brick and beat her to death. She didn't even have to wait until the next morning. That night, under the operation of Fang Tianyu and Lu Xiaoyang, and with the help of the people arranged by Tang Xiaokai, Zhuo Jingxi directly published the molecular formula of the photocatalyst for organic macromolecular chains in the largest popular science magazine in the United States. The paper version and the electronic version were simultaneously published. This ultra-complex but stable molecular formula flew through the channels of the popular science magazine to various research institutes and universities in the United States. At the same time, it flew across the sea to the mailboxes of countless institutions of higher learning and scientific research institutions in China, Asia-Pacific, Europe, Oceania, and so on. At the same time, this article clearly expressed that the researcher who developed this molecular formula, Zhuo Jingxi, had already received hundreds of millions of dollars in sponsorship. She was ready to establish her own scientific research institute. She was looking for talented scholars or young people to apply for her position. The competitive product was already in her hands, and she was just waiting for the grand plan to be realized. In addition, many of the world's leading equipment suppliers were also welcome to negotiate business. As long as your product is good enough, we don't lack money. Bravo and Woltzman, who were already extremely annoyed by this matter, almost jumped out of their beds when they saw this news. They originally thought that Qin Guang's threat to publish it in newspapers and magazines was just a negotiation tactic, and they didn't take it seriously. However, when they turned around, they saw this shocking news all over the world. This guy was for real. No wonder he left so quickly today. He didn't want to cooperate with Prince at all. The two crawled out of bed and rushed back to the laboratory office. On the way back, they called back the other senior leaders of the laboratory to urgently discuss countermeasures. Before, they had some doubts about the molecular formula that Qin Guang and Zhuo Jingxi took out, and they were worried that the other party might have made up a big lie to fool them. Now their doubts were completely dispelled. Now that the other party dared to publicize it in public, it meant that they had absolute confidence in their results and dared to let the world examine and test them. In addition, they also knew that even if others obtained the molecular formula, it would be impossible for them to synthesize it. Therefore, when they announced the results, they also announced that they were going to set up their own laboratory. After all, this was a higher level of existence based on the existing theoretical system. If other scientific research institutions really reached an agreement with them first, then the advantages that Prince had accumulated in the field of photocatalysts over the past 10 or 20 years would disappear in an instant. In addition, considering the crazy box office of Women in North America, Bravo knew that Qin Guang was the main investor of this phenomenal movie. Therefore, the hundreds of millions of investment that they announced was already in place. Zhuo Jingxi sat in the hotel room, slightly tired. She looked at Qin Guang reproachfully. Why didn't you let me use your name? If you write me as the inventor, then wouldn't I really become a thief who deceived the world? Qin Guang smiled and hugged her in his arms. You can't say that. If I don't give it to you, then you take it away. Since I took the initiative to give it to you, you are as proficient in these 5 God-level formulas as I am. We are all family. How can it be called stealing? Zhuo Jingxi shook her head fiercely. It's not the same. This is knowledge, not money. Qin Guang still insisted. It's the same. Forget it, I won't explain it to you. In short, you just need to know that I made this arrangement because I had my own deeper considerations. This is the most beneficial and helpful to me. Zhuo Jingxi looked at him in confusion. Why? Qin Guang chuckled as he continued. Think about it. In the eyes of others, I'm already capable of so many things. Now, I'm even able to push forward the development of photocatalysis technology by 50 years. That's simply not giving others a way out. What if the perverted people really go crazy and get the Four Corners Continent Special Forces to kidnap me? So now I have to push some of the benefits out, especially this kind of scientific research that involves a market of hundreds of billions of dollars. You can't take it alone. You have to quickly pull together a team to cover for yourself. Although we own the intellectual property, you have to share the credit for the research and development. There's an old saying in Wuxia, the tallest tree in the forest is the first to be destroyed by the wind. Zhuo Jingxi glared at him. You have the cheek to say that. You're just afraid that people don't know what you're capable of. You want to win an Oscar just by making a random movie. Qin Guang sighed. We can't help ourselves in this world. Alright, the night is long and I'm not in the mood to sleep. Why don't we? Zhuo Jingxi got up and ran. Don't even think about it. I still have things to do tomorrow. I've already asked for the room next door. Don't knock on the door. Saying that, she ran away with a smirk. Although she looked like she was joking, she really did not intend to stay overnight. Qin Guang watched her close the door and run away. He also knew that her worry was reasonable. He sighed and felt that he should buy super strong silicone or something. However, he looked down at his crotch again and thought to himself, with my combat power, the silicone produced by current human technology can't satisfy my combat power, right? Forget it. When I pay off the mortgage, I'll let Nicosia use the laboratory to develop a new super silicone. Super durable. It was the 7th day of the release of Women, and it was still dominating the charts. The 7th day of the North American box office was released at 1 a.m. that night. It rose against the trend and returned to $40 million, continuing to lead the pack. The next morning, Qin Guang got up early. He also received a piece of good news. He was worried that the Oscar judges in Eaton Manor would shamelessly run away overnight. In the end, he found out that none of them had left. He heard that they had quietly sneaked to the airport yesterday. However, after the news of him causing a scene in the Princeton District Court, some news related to them was interspersed. This group of unconscionable filmmakers did not have a good time. They could not afford to lose face like this. Chapter 1096. Qin Guang thought to himself, I'm going to leave Princess people hanging today anyway. Should I go back to Eaton Manor and talk to Oscar's old fogies? But after thinking about it, he changed his mind. I can't go straight to their door. The first time he went, the group of people fled and hid in the fallout shelter in a panic, which was really distressing. Although another day had passed, if he went back immediately, they would probably have the same reaction. Now, they could continue to stay in Eaton Manor because of their pride, but if he rashly went to visit again, it was hard to guarantee that they would not completely throw away their pride and run away. What can I do? After thinking for a long time, Qin Guang found a baseball cap, put on a pair of sunglasses, wrapped himself up tightly and sneaked out of the hotel. He did not drive the Lincoln that had already been recognized. Instead, he took a taxi and went straight to Eaton Manor. Blatantly visiting them was no longer possible. He had to take a roundabout way to save the country. Qin Guang planned to first disguise himself and find out the situation. Halfway there, Zhuo Jingxi called and said that Princess Dr. Bravo had called to see him. Qin Guang simply replied with 2 words, I won't see him. You really won't see him? Qin Guang snorted. Leave them hanging for now. When the others arrive, we'll talk to the others first, then talk to them. Don't show any signs of impatience. They're the ones who are anxious now. All right, we'll do as you say. I won't care about them for now. I'm hanging up. Someone's coming for an interview. That's fast. Bring Auntie May when you interview people. You can't be careless. Okay, I know. Don't worry. Qin Guang hung up the phone with Zhuo Jingxi and leaned his head against the back seat of the car. His thoughts returned to the Oscar matter. Although the photocatalyst matter was important, it was ultimately just an interlude for him. It was a seemingly important but unimportant detail. Although he had been trying to come up with a solution, he still could not come up with anything reliable until he got off the car at the gates of Eaton Manor. His original plan was to swagger in through the main entrance, but after taking 2 steps, he realized that he had forgotten to bring his invitation and membership card. In addition, last time he only showed his face for a short while when he entered the gate. When he entered, the elders of the Academy Award Committee hid like mice hiding from a cat. Qin Guang did not believe that the security guards at the gate did not inform them. So, he walked a few hundred meters around the outer wall of Eaton Manor, then flipped over the wall in a flash. Although the wall was high and there were caltrops on it, it could not stop Qin Guang. He easily lifted his leg and flipped over the wall. After entering the manor, Qin Guang adjusted the sunglasses on his face and loosened the scarf around his neck. Coupled with the Armani Haute Couture winter coat that he got from Lu Xiaoyang in Los Angeles, he did not look sneaky at all despite wearing a cap and a pair of sunglasses. Instead, he looked very dignified. Qin Guang did not care much about what he wore, but since he came to America for the Oscars this time, he had to at least keep up with his appearance when he was out or dealing with people, regardless of whether he was a loser or a rich and handsome guy. Besides, Qin Guang himself had unknowingly entered into acting mode. Of course, he had to look like an upper-class person if he wanted to disguise himself in Eaton Manor. Walking on the road, Qin Guang, who was relatively tall and slender, did not deliberately keep a low profile. From time to time, he attracted the curious glances of blonde and blue-eyed international socialites around him. Some of the bolder ones even took the initiative to strike up a conversation. Those who knew their stuff could tell that the total value of his outfit was at least tens of thousands of US dollars. He was simply a walking US dollar bill. There were only 2 kinds of people who wore US dollar bills on the streets: scammers or rich men. The latter was more likely. International socialites were also interested in rich men. Although they could not see his face, Qin Guang's figure was impeccable. Qin Guang was harassed to the point of suffering. Why am I not usually so popular? Today I wanted to hide my identity and sneak around, but all of you came at me. What if someone recognized me and posted it on social media? The old man would have to run away without turning his head. After all, you are young ladies who have seen the world in this rich land. You should be more reserved. Qin Guang fled with great difficulty. He could not even get close to the castle villa. He finally hid in a coffee shop in the corner of Eaton Manor. He found a remote booth and sat down alone. Only then did he temporarily settle down. In the past, people said that the enthusiastic crowd in Yanjing Chaoyang district was the most powerful anti-spy method. Qin Guang did not believe it, but now he believed it. The Americans weren't any better either. He turned his head and looked out through the glass window. 300 or 400 meters away was the European-style castle villa. He wanted to go in and find out the situation. Although it was only a window away, it was like an eternal farewell. Forget it, I'm really afraid of this group of judges who are just trying to scare themselves. I reckon that teacher's matter will take a few more days in Princeton. Although I don't seem to be of much use, I still have to go back and sign the contract with Prince. I can't run around with him. Qin Guang decided to stay here and try his luck. He wanted to see if he could bump into one or two senior people who had a say in the Oscar committee. He casually ordered a cup of coffee and occupied a booth. He was bored to death as he drank his coffee. He took out his phone and looked around at the crowd in the coffee shop from time to time. After carefully looking around, he found something strange. In this coffee shop that was less than 200 square meters, there were 5 or 6 groups of people sitting in 2s and 3s. But among these 5 or 6 groups of people, there was no ordinary person. They were all famous people in various European and American circles. For example, the group of strong men sitting near the entrance were the popular stars of several North American ice hockey teams. They were big shots in the NHL. Sitting in the corner on the right were a few fashionable girls. Qin Guang barely recognized them, but his ears were sharp and he heard the name of one of the girls. He looked it up on his phone and found out that it was a popular female star who had recently become popular in an HBO TV series. When he clicked into the girl's encyclopedia, the people who were sitting at the same table as her were linked in 2s and 3s. The legendary North American young female star group. Well, although there was a big gap between the North American TV and film circles, this could be considered a little bit related to the film circle. The other groups of people sitting there were also similar. Out of curiosity, Qin Guang went to look up the name of the coffee shop in the Eaton Manor. He was shocked when he found out. This inconspicuous Brosnan coffee shop was famous in North America. Many celebrities from all walks of life liked to meet here. It was similar to the Inua Club in Yanjing, but it was not as closed to the public. On second thought, there was a very strict membership invitation system to enter the gate of the Eaton Manor. Although the inside of the manor was not closed, it was strictly guarded from the outside. These people, who would cause screaming along the way, naturally enjoyed this seemingly open and free environment, but in fact, it was private and safe. In addition, the taste of the Nanshan coffee brewed in this shop was indeed very good, and the atmosphere was very good. The boss behind the shop, Brosnan, was also a world-renowned veteran jazz master. From time to time he would personally come to the shop to play a few songs, which further enhanced the style of the shop. Qin Guang waited for a while and another group of people came in. He did not need to Google to recognize one of them. Just from the way he walked and his height, he could recognize him even through sunglasses. He was a big shot in the European and American music circles, the Mars Bro. In a sense he was also a big shot, but unfortunately he was not related to the film industry. Qin Guang sighed again and did not strike up a conversation with anyone. No one paid any attention to him either. He sat for about an hour. His phone was almost out of battery and he had drunk 3 cups of coffee. He was about to get up and ask the waiter for a charger when he heard the bell at the door ring again. A tall, strong, white old man with a face full of white stubble appeared at the door. The customers in the coffee shop got up excitedly and nodded to him. Qin Guang recognized the man and was a little surprised. He did not expect to meet the owner of the coffee shop, Mr. Brosnan, by chance today. He also waved at Brosnan like the others, but in the dimly lit shop, he still wore sunglasses, which made him look a little weird. Brosnan also waved at him and went directly backstage. Qin Guang's action attracted the attention of others. Some people turned the topic to him and whispered incessantly. Qin Guang's ears were very sharp, so he heard every word clearly. He forcibly translated it into down-to-earth Chinese, and this was the general meaning. Why is he pretending to be a wolf with a pig nose? None of us are wearing sunglasses and Mars Bro has taken them off. This guy still thinks he's a celebrity and is afraid of being recognized. Maybe he's a prince from the Middle East. Prince from the Middle East? Didn't you see his black hair? He must be Asian. How funny. No wonder these people thought Chen Guang looked funny. Everyone sitting here was famous, but he was the only one who wore sunglasses and refused to take them off. If he was not afraid of exposing his identity, Chen Guang really wanted to slap these people's tables. What do you know? At least I'm more famous than you in America now. However, he endured it in the end and waited for a while. It seemed that after Brosnan arrived, more and more people came in one after another and went straight to the booths. It seemed that today was Brosnan's fixed performance day. Chapter 1097. On the other hand, Chen Guang saw quite a few familiar faces, such as Irma Watson, whom he had caught a glimpse of at the premiere of his Woman. He knew this girl. Her name was similar to Emma Watson, who acted in Harry Potter, but she was not as famous. She seemed to be someone in the film industry, but the strange thing was that although she was not very famous among ordinary people, her status in the film industry was not low. She had appeared at the premiere of Sunshine, as a guest of William Jones. She did not seem very active at the premiere from beginning to end. Whether it was when William Jones and the others laughed at Chen Guang, or when the superstars of the fighting world appeared, she was very calm. But the strange thing was, no matter how crazy and excited the others were, she always stood in the middle of the crowd. But at that time, Chen Guang did not care about her at all. He did not care about everyone around William Jones and Ben Affleck. But today, Chen Guang deliberately heard her name clearly and searched for her information on Google with the little battery left on his phone. She was 25 years old this year and had just graduated from Yale last year. She majored in law but chose to become an actress. So far, she had acted in a few lesser-known literary films, none of which were big hits, and she had only played insignificant supporting roles. Everything else about her was a blank slate. After she entered the cafe, she sat with the actresses from the previous TV series and whispered to each other happily. More and more people came, so much so that almost every booth was full. Finally, a group of uninvited guests came to the table that Chen Guang occupied alone. They were a few young people and they seemed to be a band that had recently become popular. "Hey bro, are you sitting here alone? Can we sit down at this table?" One of the young men with blonde hair asked. Then, without waiting for Chen Guang to answer, he sat straight down. The others followed closely. In just a moment, the small booth was filled with 6 people, Chen Guang and the 5-member band. Chen Guang did not take off his sunglasses, nor did he pay attention to them. He continued to fiddle with his phone. Foreigners were like this, especially this group of obviously explosive rock singers. At first glance, one could not expect much from them. They pretended to be friendly and easy to get along with, but in fact their behavior was simply rude. But now that all the booths were full, it seemed very rude for Chen Guang to take a seat alone. Those people did not ask for coffee like Chen Guang. Instead, they raised their hands to ask the waiter to order a Bloody Mary cocktail, as if they were afraid that others would not know they were Maverick. "Bro, why don't you take off your sunglasses? No one here will scream for your autograph just because you're a celebrity. Look, everyone here is a celebrity." While waiting for the waiter to bring the drinks, the blond man with the bird's nest hair pretended to greet Chen Guang while suddenly reaching his hand for Chen Guang's sunglasses. He was really friendly. Chen Guang pinched his hand and exerted a little more strength, causing the white youth's face to instantly turn pale. Then Chen Guang threw his hand back. "Watch your hand. I'm not your bro." The other punk youths were about to flip out when the young man with the bird's nest hair, whose palm was still bruised, quickly restrained his friend. The young man with the bird's nest hair quietly rubbed his palm under the table and forced a smile. He said, "Sorry, I didn't know you were so sensitive. I know that many people have some weird habits. I completely understand that. We are the same. We are also crazy at concerts. I just don't think your behavior is very polite." He was a little afraid of Chen Guang. He felt that if Chen Guang had exerted a little more strength, the bones in his palm might have been crushed. Although the hockey stars over there were his friends and they were also very good at playing, he knew that Brosnan would never allow anyone to cause trouble in his coffee shop. He did not want to be chased away. At the very least, he could not let people think that he and his friends were the ones who were stirring up trouble. Chen Guang raised his head slightly and adjusted his sunglasses, hiding his face even deeper. "So, you sat at my table without my permission. Is that very polite?" Before they could speak, Chen Guang waved his hand again. "Forget it. Don't talk to me. I don't want to know you and I'm not interested in sharing my weird habits with you." Chen Guang was in a bad mood at the moment because he realized that even on such an occasion, even though the place was already full of celebrities, The only person in the coffee shop who had the deepest relationship with the film industry was Irma. What was even more tragic was that he heard such a conversation in the crowd. "By the way, aren't Mr. Hernandez and the others coming?" "Don't mention it. I called them before I came over and they said they were in a meeting." "What meeting?" "Considering whether to give the Oscar a Young Achievement Award to get rid of that Wuxia guy." Qin Guang was speechless. "Who the hell wants a Young Achievement Award? I want the Best Actor Award." "Best Actor Award? I can't get this kind of award that's used to get rid of beggars, okay?" He was speechless. The Oscar Best Actor Award could not be delayed. If he couldn't get it this year and had to wait until next year, then there was no need to struggle anymore. He could just go straight to Babaishan and find himself a good feng shui land that could emit smoke from his grave. Shameful cowards. "I'm just letting you watch my movie. I'm not going to dig out your eyes. Do you have to be like this?" The bastards hiding in the castle were even more cowardly than he thought. Qin Guang felt that his plan to meet them by chance was going to be completely ruined. Did he really have to force himself to barge in, tie everyone up, put a knife on their necks and force them to watch women? "I'm a good person. Why are you forcing me to be a prostitute?" After waiting for a few more minutes, the cafe was completely full. Even some of the corners were filled with people. The young man with the bird's nest haircut was a chatterbox after all. He approached Qin Guang again. "Friend, say something? I admit that you're very mysterious and you've piqued my interest, but I think we should have a common interest. At least, you should be like all of us and you should be here for Mr. Brosnan's jazz music, right? People who like music should have some common interest, right?" Qin Guang turned to look at him. "Shut up. No one will think you're mute if you don't speak." The young man next to him finally couldn't take it anymore. "Do you know who we are? I've never seen a person as arrogant as you." The corner of Qin Guang's mouth slightly curved behind his sunglasses. "Whether I'm arrogant or not has nothing to do with you. I don't even want to know who you are. You've been harassing me since you sat here. I'm telling you clearly that I'm not interested in jazz. Can you shut up now?" The young man wanted to say something, but Qin Guang picked up the steel wine glass in front of them with 2 fingers and gently exerted force. There it was. His daily act of crushing things. It worked. Under the dumbfounded eyes of these guys, Qin Guang used only 2 fingers to crush the steel glass, which was more than 3 millimeters thick, into a flat iron plate. "You'll pay for this glass. I'm warning you for the last time. If you bother me again, I'll crush your guitar hands next time." This time they were all well behaved. Although their eyes were full of indignation and unwillingness, Qin Guang finally had some peace. "Boorish man. Violent man. Since you don't like jazz, why did you come here early to occupy the precious booth? Don't you know that today is Mr. Brosnan's annual theme performance day? Do you know how many people are stopped from coming in?" Qin Guang could imagine how these guys would complain about him in their hearts, but he didn't care at all. He was ready to leave after finishing the top-quality nanshan in front of him. The old man had no interest in jazz at all. The old man's piano idol had reached its peak. Now he just wanted to get an Oscar. "I'm trying to save my own life. Who has time to play with you guys?" Just as he was about to get up and leave, Brosnan finally changed his clothes and came out from the backstage of the coffee shop. Standing on the stage, which was less than 10 square meters in size, he suddenly raised his hand and lifted the curtain covering the stage. A bright white piano appeared on the stage, and the audience suddenly burst into thunderous applause. Brosnan turned to the audience and made a standard aristocratic salute. Then he got up and said, "Thank you for coming to Brosnan's coffee shop. Today is the annual theme performance day. As you can see, this piano is a treasure that I just borrowed from my friend last week. Its name is Mississippi Pearl. It was created by Ace Fernandez and is as famous as Nightingale. So today's theme is indeed related to the piano. It's called 1900. As soon as he finished speaking, there was another thunderous applause in the coffee shop. Pianist on the Sea was an epic-making movie, and it was much more famous in Europe and the United States than in China. The fictional character 1900 even, in a sense, conformed to the perfect image in the minds of many European and American literary fans. He was born on the sea, lived for the piano and died with the sound of the piano in the storm. He didn't have his own name, nor did he have any music that was passed down to the world. But what he represented was the purest pursuit of art. Many people didn't expect that Brosnan's theme today would be to use the piano, Mississippi Pearl, to interpret the story of 1900. Qin Guang, who had just raised his but slightly, sat down again. He couldn't deny that even though he knew it was a waste of time, he was still attracted by Brosnan's theme. There was no other reason. His strongest piano craftsmanship had been perfected by playing the role of 1900 on the virtual Virginian in the World of Cups. He didn't know why, but he couldn't control his strong impulse to act cool. Damn it, the most authentic 1900 in history is here. How dare you hold a theme concert of 1900 in front of me? Do I give you face? Brosnan didn't know that he had provoked the wrong person. He still said enthusiastically, as we all know, the contest between 1900 and the jazz master in the Hall of the Virginian is a very important scene in the whole movie. Today I will perform all the songs involved in this contest for you. After that, he said naughtily, of course I know that many of you here can play the piano. So, every time I play a song I will invite a friend to come on the stage just like the contest between 1900 and the jazz master. What do you think? Naturally, there was another burst of cheers in the coffee shop. Whether it was playing with Brosnan or touching the Mississippi Pearl, it was a rare honor for a musician. Only Qin Guang looked at the old man through a pair of sunglasses. You're finished, you're really finished. Chapter 1098. Brosnan looked like a master, but he actually enjoyed the feeling of being worshipped. Otherwise, why would he still go to his own coffee shop to play from time to time at the age of 60? Brosnan raised his hands slightly and gestured for the audience to be quiet. Immediately, the crowd in the coffee shop quickly settled down and became silent. Then, he gently pulled out a round stool and sat in front of the white piano. A solemn atmosphere arose spontaneously in the cafe. After a brief silence, Brosnan's old but slender and flexible fingers fell on the keys. The melodious and rhythmic sound of the piano resounded in the coffee shop in an instant. Everyone sitting in the coffee shop pricked up their ears and listened attentively. As Brosnan said, he was playing a classic piece from The Pianist on the Sea, which was played by Jerry, the founder of jazz in the movie. In addition, he had added some of his own adaptations, which made the whole piece more layered. Beautiful notes jumped out of his fingertips like a waterfall, like lively and lovely elves, circling every corner of the coffee shop and cheering. His music was extremely smooth, just like silk that had just been woven. It fell straight down like mercury hit the ground and then bounced up again, adding a bit of liveliness. Brosnan's adaptations on the basis of traditional blues made his piano sound even more beautiful than the original sound in the movie. His artistic achievement in arranging music was comparable to that of Ennio Morricone, the film arranger of The Pianist on the Sea, and his achievement in performance was comparable to that of Gita Buddha, the performer of the film's original soundtrack. At this time, Brosnan, a real master of arranging and performing, played a piece in the cafe that surpassed the original soundtrack in terms of artistic achievement. Although Jerry in 1900, portrayed in the movie, could be regarded as the most perfect piano artist of that era, the music of the movie itself was still just an ordinary modern score which was not so perfect. Ennio and Gita might be world-renowned, but they were not undeservedly unsurpassed. It might be more difficult to judge the quality of music than to select an Oscar winner. In a certain sense, perhaps only Qin Guang himself knew what a perfect piece of music that was made up in movies was like. It didn't exist, but it was something that everyone in the world was in awe of. Just like now, when everyone else was intoxicated by it, he was the only one who was unmoved. He even felt disgusted by Brosnan's adaptation. The effect of Jerry's performance, which he had encountered in The World in the Cup, was indeed somewhat different from that of the Italian national treasure, Gita. However, it was completely different from Brosnan's seemingly exquisite but actually stupid and clumsy adaptation. Instead, it was truly beyond the limits of human beings and only belonged to God. Perhaps it was because Qin Guang had seen what true perfection looked like, so his expectations of Brosnan were too high. At the very least, it sounded like Brosnan had done a great job in the ears of others. Finally, when Brosnan finished his performance, the cafe burst into thunderous applause after a brief silence. The old man stood up from his stool, bowed to the audience below the stage and said, "The score is on the Apple computer in front of the piano. Are any of you interested in coming up and playing? Of course, it doesn't matter if you know the original version of the movie, but you can't play Come Back, Dad. I dare not compare myself to Mr. Jerry Morton, and you can't compare yourselves to 1900, right? We're just playing a simple theme." As soon as Brosnan's voice fell, many people in the cafe were eager to have a try. Professional pianists wanted to try Brosnan's adapted blues with Mississippi Pearls, and there were also people who had deliberately practiced movie soundtracks before who wanted to show off in front of everyone. But even so, no one stood up and went straight to the stage. This seemed to be a very casual private occasion, but because there were too many celebrities here, the value of this performance was raised a lot out of thin air. Of course it was great to play well, but if you messed up it would be a great shame. The keyboardist of the 5-member band sitting at the same table as Qin Guang was also one of the people who was tempted. He said to the young man with bird's nest hair next to him, "Although I'm not very skilled, I really want to give it a try." "Then be brave and go up there. There are many seniors here. I'll see the situation first. If no one goes up in 30 seconds I'll give it a try." Brosnan seemed to have guessed this scene and he was a little disappointed. He said, "Actually, my friend Malfoy Bentler was also going to come today. I was going to invite him to play this song directly." As soon as Brosnan's voice fell, people in the cafe began to whisper. Malfoy Bentler was also a celebrity among celebrities in Europe and the United States. In the past 10 or 20 years he had produced soundtracks for more than 100 movies, and his artistic achievements were not inferior to Ennio Morricone's. In addition to being a musician, Mr. Bentler was also a standing member of the Academy Award Committee, and his opinion on the selection of the Academy Award for Best Music was very important. At this moment he was in an old castle villa less than half a kilometer away from the cafe. "Mr. Brosnan, then why didn't Mr. Bentler come?" someone in the crowd asked loudly. Qin Guang rolled his eyes silently. He had a hunch that he was going to be attacked every day. Sure enough, Brosnan sighed. Because of some special reasons that everyone knows, Malfoy temporarily changed his itinerary. At least, he probably won't come out of the villa before the Wuxia man leaves Princeton. The crowd in the cafe suddenly became excited. "Damn the Wuxia man. We can't let him behave atrociously on American soil. Although his movie is really good, he can't treat Mr. Joshtan like this. He's humiliating us. We should unite and ask the diplomats to put him on the list of unwelcome people and expel him from the country. Before he is expelled we should teach him a lesson. He's too arrogant." The young man sitting in front of Qin Guang also shouted loudly, "That Wuxia man better not appear in front of me, or I'll beat the sh*t out of him." Looking at Su Tao, Qin Guang pondered in his heart, "Honestly speaking, I can beat 100 of you without batting an eye with your appearance." The noise in the cafe lasted for a few minutes before it calmed down. Although not everyone hated the Wuxia man Qin Guang, it was obvious that everyone agreed with Brosnan on his territory. Qin Guang glanced around and saw that only Elma Watson and a few other people did not join in the uproar. "Sigh, detestable Donald, you've had your fun running around naked, but I've become king scapegoat. I've almost become a street rat." Brosnan called out again, Okay, everyone quiet down. Don't talk about unhappy things. Although it's a pity that I can't perform with Malfoy on the same stage, it's an honor for me to be able to perfect the song in Pianist on the Sea. In fact, I didn't adapt this song alone, but Malfoy and I did it together. Everyone thank him." After insulting the Wuxia man Qin Guang, Brosnan decisively turned everyone's attention back to him. After all, his main purpose today was to show off and enjoy the joy of success. "Thank you, Mr. Brosnan and Mr. Bentler, for your contributions. You two are indeed one of the most outstanding music artists in the world today." The people in the cafe did not disappoint him, and all kinds of mushy flattery rose to the sky. Only Qin Guang, who was hiding behind his sunglasses, curled up the corners of his mouth slightly and sneered disdainfully. "You're a frog at the bottom of a well. You're not perfect at all. You're just wasting it." Bah. "Sunglasses man, what do you mean? What was that expression on your face just now? Are you looking down on Mr. Brosnan?" The keyboardist, who was sitting opposite Qin Guang, turned around and saw the cold smile on Qin Guang's face, which was out of place with everyone else. He was instantly enraged. From the beginning they didn't like Qin Guang, but they had been holding back their temper. Now not only did Qin Guang not give them face, but he even looked down on Brosnan in public. This young man couldn't stand it. "You can scold me, but you can't insult my idol." The keyboardist's voice was so loud that countless eyes in the cafe focused on him and Qin Guang. Originally, as the only man in sunglasses in the cafe, Qin Guang had been a maverick because he loved sunglasses more than Brother Mars. Now he had become the target of public criticism. The keyboardist looked at Qin Guang angrily, feeling both angry and proud. "Annoying mysterious boy, aren't you very arrogant? Keep being arrogant. Let's see how you can be arrogant now. Don't think that I don't know what you're thinking. You don't understand music at all. That's why you're smiling like that. You were looking down on people just now." The other 4 people at the same table as Qin Guang also looked at Qin Guang with great interest and didn't say a word. They wouldn't help Qin Guang explain. Their purpose was to see Qin Guang embarrass himself. They didn't believe that this guy would dare to be arrogant in front of so many people on such an occasion. Chen Guang looked around silently and saw that everyone was looking at him with unkind eyes. He then turned his head to the keyboardist in front of him and saw a little pride in the guy's angry eyes. Chen Guang thought to himself, this bastard must think that I'm pretending to be a grandson and that he can finally embarrass me. But I'm sorry, I'm worried that I don't have a title, so it's not convenient for me to go on stage and slap people in the face. You're giving me a pillow when I want to doze off. Thank you so much. Chen Guang stood up slowly. You're right, young man. I really don't like the arrogant words of this Brosnan. F***ck. Beat him up. *T. B***tc. As soon as Chen Guang said that, the crowd exploded. A few hot-tempered people jumped up and were about to rush forward. On the other hand, the 5-member band at the same table as Chen Guang was very restrained. They were stunned. They had thought that the man in sunglasses was just eccentric, but now they knew that he was a psychopath. He didn't know fear at all and didn't know the basic respect for others. At that moment, Chen Guang pulled out the chair behind him and walked forward. As he walked, he deliberately straightened his hands and groped in front of him, then pretended to trip over a leg of a table and almost fell to the ground. The angry crowd quickly calmed down. Oh, so he's blind. Poor guy, no wonder he refused to take off his sunglasses. The lead singer of the 5-member band, the young man with the bird's nest haircut, was very puzzled. Didn't he have good eyes and quick reflexes when I tried to grab his sunglasses? How could he be blind? No, could it be that he used his ears to judge my hand movements? Is he the blind man in Chinese movies? While the young man with the bird's nest haircut was puzzled, Chen Guang had already approached the stage. Then he pulled over the stool in front of the Pearl of the Mississippi and sat down. He turned his head back and smiled under his sunglasses, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. Mr. Brosnan just said that anyone who is interested can come up and play the same song as him. I didn't intend to go up on stage, but I think your blind worship is too stupid and ridiculous. Now I'll tell you why I think Brosnan is talking nonsense. I'll tell you what the real blues is. After Chen Guang finished speaking, he ignored all the voices in the noisy cafe. Under Brosnan's angry and confused gaze, he turned around and touched the keys with lightning speed. Lowly mortals, you will never understand that the perfection you see will always be the perfection of mortals. Real perfection only exists in the old man's world of cups, which is perfection created by the power of the real God. Listen up, all of you. Chapter 1099. If Brosnan's music was like flowing mercury, then Chen Guang's music was like a natural spring rain. If Brosnan's music was like dancing elves, then Chen Guang's music was like an angel flying out of the gate of heaven. Brosnan's blues was a beautiful painting for the audience in the cafe, but what Chen Guang played, which was composed by the heavenly Holy Grail and performed by the NPCs in the world in the cup, opened a holy door to perfection for the audience. To humans, there would never be a truly perfect music because humans were always striving for something better. In the human mind, perfection was something that everyone wanted to achieve, but it was impossible for them to achieve it. However, for Chen Guang and the heavenly Holy Grail, what he played might not be perfect in the endless realm of the gods, but from the perspective and level of humans, there was really nothing to nitpick about. The incomparably beautiful music shot out of Chen Guang's fingertips and lingered in the cafe. There was a saying that lingered for 3 days without ending. Although it was an imaginary saying, it actually referred to the fact that the music was so beautiful that people could not help but repeat it repeatedly in their minds. At this moment, the music that Chen Guang played had such an effect. It penetrated the eardrums and struck people's hearts, leaving a mark in the depths of their souls. Of course, although the music created by the heavenly Holy Grail was perfect, only Chen Guang was able to perform it. No matter how great a master he was, no matter how much he practiced during the performance, it would be impossible for him to be as perfect as Chen Guang. Even if there was a difference of less than 0.001 second in any of the seemingly minor notes, it would become a flaw in the entire performance process, and it would be infinitely magnified in the ears of those who understood music, thus affecting the performance of the entire piece. Just like Da Vinci's paintings, every masterpiece contained the inevitability of Da Vinci's artistic achievements, as well as the serendipity of his creative inspiration. Da Vinci had perfectly combined the two elements of inevitability and serendipity, resulting in an artistic chemical reaction that changed quantity to quality. Only then did he become a true masterpiece. On such a piece of work, even the slightest mistake that seemed insignificant, or even the size of a strand of hair, would become an unforgettable flaw. Asking others to perform Qin Guang's piece would always depend on the actual performance effects brought about by individual differences. Everyone's talent was different. The length of the fingers, dexterity, and the speed at which the brain analyzed the music score would all be different. Therefore, the rhythm in which they hit the keys would also be different. Even the personality of the pianist would affect the music they played. This was also the reason why many piano artists would have different styles when they played the same piece. However, performing the piece of the Heavenly Holy Grail did not require any personal style, only a complete and accurate reproduction of the original sound. Because the piece itself was too perfect, any individual's performance would be superfluous. As long as the piece was restored to its original state, it would be the highest artistic achievement. In the whole world, Qin Guang was the only one who could reproduce the original sound. In terms of musical creativity, Qin Guang was almost a zero, but in terms of piano performance as a humanoid jukebox, no one would dare to say that they were the best in history. What artistic talent! What's the use of that? What I pursue is accuracy. In a blur, the expressions of the people in the cafe changed from anger and confusion to unknowingly intoxicated. The same was true for Brosnan, who was standing behind Qin Guang. Although he had said that anyone could go on stage and perform, he had already chosen someone in his heart. It was just that Qin Guang pretended to be blind and went on stage directly, catching him off guard. By the time he wanted to stop him, Qin Guang had already sat on the stool and started playing. Brosnan was very calm at first, but when he heard that Qin Guang's performance was different from his own and the film's original sound, he felt very disdainful at first, thinking that this blind man was too confident. Do you think anyone is qualified to adapt Ano's work? Do you know what you're doing? But before he could finish mocking Qin Guang in his heart, when Qin Guang's second note came out, he was instantly stunned, and then an unimaginable thought came to his mind. What's going on? It seems like his adaptation is better than mine and Malfoy's? How is that possible? This is music, this is art. How can I have such a feeling after listening to it for only a few seconds? An artistic achievement is not a 100-meter race. How can it be so easy to judge whether it's good or bad? I must have been hallucinating just now. Once again, Brosnan focused his mind and worked even harder to comprehend the movement that Qin Guang had performed. His own artistic achievement could be considered the highest in the cafe at that time. When he was fully immersed in it, he was completely intoxicated in it in an instant, standing still like a wax figure in Madame Tussauds wax museum. In a trance, he felt that he was vaguely wandering in the sea of music, unable to extricate himself. Each note played by Qin Guang was like a stunning brush stroke on a canvas, forming a picture in front of Brosnan, pulling him into it. These notes were like bricks, building one beautiful building after another around him, making him feel like he was in a quiet castle, and then he felt like he was in a Munich factory with roaring machines, and then he felt like he was standing in front of the Louvre and looking up. Vaguely, the picture changed again and Brosnan's memory was pulled back to his childhood. Looking around, the eyes of the 61-year-old Brosnan were filled with the back of his 16-year-old self. He seemed to have returned to the campus full of fragrant camphor trees, walking side by side with Velina on a path sprinkled with dried yellow leaves. With every step he took, he could hear the rustling sound of the fallen leaves being stepped on. Velina was also using her Oriole-like voice to sketch out a beautiful future for the two of them. The soothing and melodious blues completely dragged the old man named Brosnan into a whirlpool of memories, sinking deeper and deeper until even his soul was about to be swallowed. When the music gradually stopped, Brosnan came back to himself after a long time. When he touched his face, he found that it was wet with tears. Velina had been dead for almost 10 years, and the lilacs in front of her grave had been replaced 20 times. He looked around again and saw that the hundreds of people in the large cafe were also in the same situation. Everyone's face was covered with tears. Even the strong men who played ice hockey also had tears in their eyes. Qin Guang, who was disguised as a blind man, stood up. A middle-aged black man next to him hurriedly stood up and pushed his chair to Qin Guang. "Sir, please sit down." Qin Guang did not stand on ceremony with him. He sat down calmly. If he had only shown an ordinary level of strength, Brosnan's fans in the cafe would not have been so impressed by him and respected him so much. However, what Qin Guang had brought out was a perfect adaptation from The World in Cups, which was the most perfect tune in the truest sense. Although piano performance in the general sense could not be judged easily, the level that Qin Guang had shown was so high that it would become an eternal classic that would transcend time. The strength that he displayed was so overwhelming that many people present, like Brosnan, quickly had the thought that his adaptation was better than the others. However, others did not know that this was the result of the heavenly Holy Grail. They just thought that it was Qin Guang's adaptation and creation. People's admiration for him instantly rose to another level and realm. People slowly turned their eyes to Brosnan and could not help but sympathize with this famous jazz master. This was supposed to be his stage. How could such a blind master appear out of nowhere? The 5-member punk band that had forced Qin Guang onto the stage was now extremely embarrassed. If this blind master had only walked onto the stage by himself, Mr. Brosnan would not have been too embarrassed. However, it was precisely because of the provocation of these people that Mr. Brosnan had said in public that he thought Mr. Brosnan was just talking nonsense. Previously they had thought that Mr. Brosnan was ignorant, but now they knew that Mr. Brosnan was the real deal. What he had said was right. This was King embarrassing. Wasn't this putting Mr. Brosnan on a fire? Mr. Brosnan seemed to be kind, but he was actually arrogant, which was known to almost everyone in the European and American music circles. What would he do now? After this matter is over, will he bear a grudge against us for making things difficult for him? Finally, under the gaze of the crowd, Brosnan lit a cigar and took a deep puff. He then turned to Qin Guang and suddenly bowed. "Thank you, sir, for letting me hear such a wonderful piece of music. Thank you for teaching me a lesson, sir. Never underestimate others." Someone secretly added to Brosnan's words, "Never underestimate a person with physical defects. God knows whether a blind person's hearing is particularly terrifying, and God knows whether a deaf person is Beethoven." Qin Guang, who had successfully shown off, was also in a good mood. Sitting on a chair, he nodded at Brosnan in a manner that was full of seniority. "Mr. Brosnan, you're too polite. You're also very outstanding." "Thank you for your compliment, sir. May I know your name?" Qin Guang thought for a moment. "Just call me Blake." While speaking, he did not deviate from his world-class acting skills. Instead, he made his behavior and tone seem like a real blind master. Brosnan said again, "Okay, Mr. Blake." Qin Guang nodded slightly. "Now shall we play the next piece?" Brosnan nodded. "Sorry, I need to take a puff or two to calm down." After he comfortably took 2 puffs of his cigar, he suddenly realized something. "Aren't I just like Jerry in the movie?" The crowd burst into laughter. Brosnan blushed. "I'm not as good as Mr. Jerry Morton, but Mr. Blake, you," Qin Guang interrupted him. "I'm not 1900. I'm standing on the land of Princeton and I won't drown in the sea." The crowd in the cafe laughed again. Chapter 1100. Brosnan took a deep breath, adjusted his mood and played "Come Back, Dad, Dad, Come Back," which sounded similar to Silent Night, but was actually a song that 1900 himself had adapted from a child singing. Brosnan also added his own and Malfoy Bentler's adaptations, which further elevated the song, which had seemed immature but lacked depth in the film's original soundtrack. When he finished playing, the audience still enjoyed it. No one could deny the subtlety of his adaptation. But after a brief moment of amazement, the audience turned their eyes to the blind Blake, who had been sitting motionless on the stool from beginning to end. They were already looking forward to his performance. This time, Qin Guang sat on the stool, and Brosnan even adjusted the height of the chair for him. Qin Guang was not in a hurry to play. Instead, he turned his head and said, "Thank you. Your adaptation was great, but it was more like Silent Night than Come Back, Dad, Come Back. Your adaptation has some flashy content, but it lacks some childishness. This is not the real Come Back, Dad, Come Back." You can even say that the song composed by Ennio Morricone and performed by Gita Buddha is not 1900's Come Back, Dad, Come Back. Their works pursue childlike innocence excessively, but they are too crude. The songs shown in the movie are good for deceiving laymen, but in my eyes they are full of flaws. That is the childlike innocence of adults, not the childlike innocence of children performed in 1900. If he had said this before, he would probably have been beaten up. But now no one dared to question his judgment. At least, even if they were dissatisfied, they still kept silent. Only a few people in the crowd, such as Irma Watson, showed disdain and dissatisfaction on their faces. She was a loyal fan of Pianist on the Sea, and in her eyes the soundtrack of the film was a real master. Although she didn't deny Mr. Black's talent, it was a little too arrogant for him to attack Brosnan and then Anno. However, Qin Guang paid no attention to the peculiar gazes and continued, "Although the story in 1900 was made up by the movie, can we understand it as a fictional world? The world that only appeared on the screen, can we view it as a real world?" At this time, someone rushed to answer, "Mr. Blake, your words are very similar to the book written by the Wuxia Right Chin that I read before. It's like what he said about the World School of Performing Arts." Qin Guang smiled and nodded. "Yes, I think so too. Alright, let's get back to our music. So, if the world of 1900 really existed, what would the real performance of Come Back, Dad, performed by 1900 in his own world be like? Like what Anno and Jetta acted out? Or is it like what Alessandro Barrico, the author of the screenplay, wrote in his book?" People were lost in thought. On the one hand, they were thinking about what Qin Guang had said and trying their best to guess the real appearance of Come Back, Dad. On the other hand, they were trying to figure out Qin Guang's World School of Performing Arts. After all, the people here did not have much to do with the film. Except for Irma, they did not read World School of Performing Arts. Many people thought that it was a farce made by the Wuxia people. It was not called film art but metaphysics. It could even be called philosophy, but it was not performing arts. Although 1900 adapted the clumsy music sung by a little boy, he himself was a very pure person. So, his music and his innocence should be like this. When the music started again, the people's argument quickly stopped. No matter whether they were convinced or not, they still had to listen to it. About a few minutes later, Qin Guang's fingers gradually stopped. People felt very complicated and they did not know how to describe it. Although Qin Guang's performance couldn't be considered beautiful, no one would agree to it if they were to say that it was bad. It was unique, weird, and strange, which made people feel that it was good but not good at the same time. They felt that the music was full of flaws. However, when they thought about it after it was played, they felt that it was natural, as if it was supposed to be like this. In the end, it was Brosnan who summed up the confusion in everyone's mind. "Mr. Blake, although I don't quite understand it, I always feel that this seems to be what 1900 should be like, if that world really exists." Everyone suddenly understood. "That's right. That's right. Thank you, the great Mr. Blake." Qin Guang stood up and slightly pressed his hand down. "For us, the world of 1900 is fictional, but for him, his world certainly exists. It could even be said that in every novel, every character and every story, they all had a real world that existed. In that case, this song is indeed real and it should be so." As soon as he finished his words, the cafe suddenly burst into thunderous applause. People cheered and screamed. Hiding in the crowd, Irma looked at the blind man in sunglasses. She did not know how to describe her feelings at the moment. She really did not want to admit that this man's work was better than Ennio's and Gida's, but it had become a fact that could not be refuted. Irma had never thought that artistic achievements could be quantified so easily. The gap between good and better was so vivid in reality that it was almost within reach. She was very confused, but it did not affect her admiration for this Mr. Blake. She even knew that the name Blake must be an alias. Maybe because he knew that he was blind and felt that his world was dark, so when people asked him for his name, he would casually say Blake. If Qin Guang knew what Irma was thinking, he would probably laugh. "It's really not that deep. You think I'm blind because my acting is too good. In fact, it's because my name is Right Chin. I don't want you to associate me with Right Chin, so I specifically used an antonym. Right represents the light, and Blake represents the darkness. Mr. Blake, I don't have the courage to continue playing the next few songs. How about you finish the performance?" Brosnan, after a brief hesitation, did not sit on the stool after Qin Guang. Instead, he spoke humbly. Qin Guang did not stand on ceremony with him. He could not go to the castle villa even if he continued to stay here. He just wanted to quickly show off and leave. He would go back at night and change into his night clothes. Ahem, a song called The Crave for All of You. This is The Crave, by Jeremy Morton. A few minutes later, everyone was crying their hearts out. Qin Guang did not give the crowd time to breathe. He said again, "This is The Crave, by 1900. His performance was not perfect, but it was terrifying that he vividly displayed the state of 1900 after its emotions were affected. It even gave the audience the illusion that he was the 1900 sitting in front of the piano, and Brosnan standing behind him was the king of jazz, Jeremiah Morton. And we are the audience sitting in the third-class bar of the Virginian?" Qin Guang completely brought the audience into the world of 1900. Now, I'd like to present you the song Enduring Movement. This time, Qin Guang did not jump to the position of Jeremiah Morton. Instead, he went straight to the last song of 1900. When the storm-like notes suddenly stopped, the audience's faces were as cold as frost. It was as if they were standing on the side of the Virginian and had been hit hard by the sea storm. They wiped their faces and found that their palms were wet with sweat. They had not expected that they would sweat while listening to a piece of piano music. The audience gradually came to their senses and focused their eyes on the piano on the stage. They were surprised to find that Mr. Blake, who should have been sitting there, had disappeared. Where is he? At this moment, Brosnan's body was trembling, and his hands were shaking. He took out a pack of Marlboros from his pocket and gently put the cigarette butt on the strings of the Mississippi Pearl. The flame lit up like stars. Brosnan raised the butt of his cigarette. It burned very slowly, but it was beautiful. There was no sound in the cafe. People seemed to be able to hear the rustling sound of the burning cigarette butt. Brosnan's movements were just like 1900 in the movie, but no one thought he was 1900. The real 1900 Mr. Blake had left. The hockey players sitting at the entrance of the cafe were the first to react. They rushed to the door only to find that it was empty outside. Mr. Blake was nowhere to be seen. People turned back to question the punk band members who had been sitting at the same table as Chen Guang. What did these poor young people know? They could not answer anything. Others asked them what they had talked about with Mr. Blake. Although they also admired Blake, they were still quite indignant about what had happened to them just now. Therefore, they exaggerated and described Chen Guang's arrogance and unreasonableness. Unexpectedly, after the others heard it, they did not feel like they had a common enemy. Instead, they were all amazed. This is the character of a real great artist. Handsome. So handsome. Even if he is blind, I want to have children with him. The unruly great artist. It's a pity that we couldn't get his phone number. Who do you think he could be? God knows. I can't think of any possible identity. Blake is a fake name, right? Yes, the night gave me black eyes, but I used them to find the light. This is what a Wuxia poet said. I think it's the best way to describe Mr. Blake. Irma was also in the crowd, but she did not say a word. A name popped up in her mind. Although it seemed unbelievable after all, everyone knew that the Wuxia Chen Guang was not blind. That Mr. Blake could not have been pretending to be blind, whether it was the small movements he made when he walked or other aspects. Irma swore with her most professional actor's eyes. But Blake's character and the Wuxia Chen Guang's character. The same black hair, the same arrogance, and the same recognition of the world's performing arts. Oh yes, the Wuxia Chen Guang's piano skills were also very scary. The most important thing was the Wuxia Chen Guang's perfect acting skills. These two people were probably the same person. Irma thought so. But we would never have thought that not only could he play the piano, but his artistic achievements were also so high. If he did not act in movies, he would definitely become the greatest pianist in history. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.